An old memory drifts through Gruhorn's mind as the tale begins. He was reincarnated as a sword, and over hundreds of long years he met many masters. He shaped every one of them into a hero whose name history would refuse to forget. Then one day, in a nameless rural village called Leonberg, he met the one he would come to call his comrade. Together the two of them roamed the world, and the feats they pulled off climbed past what any single hero could ever match. Amid the snowstorm, a fierce battle rages on. A dragon bursts out of the explosion, and beneath its towering feet stands the young man. He gasps for breath, barely holding himself together. The dragon lets out a deafening roar before unleashing a devastating blast from its mouth. Instead of backing away, our boy charges straight toward the incoming beam. The attack tears through everything in its path as it races toward him. With a thunderous roar, he channels every ounce of his energy into his sword. When the great white dragon of the Frost Mountains finally fell to them, his comrade smiled at him with a warm voice and told him to keep going, my friend. He leaps high above the dragon's head and brings his sword down in one decisive strike, slicing the dragon into countless pieces. Not long after, that same comrade quietly walked off the battlefield and onto a throne, becoming the ruler of a whole kingdom. Gruhorn, meanwhile, was laid to rest in the royal hall as the legend of the Dragon Slayer. His comrade's last whispered request settled deep inside him. Gruhorn, please look after my descendants. For long silent generations the sword sits on its altar. Then one afternoon, the peace shatters. Someone shakes his hilt hard, and a fat, arrogant voice announces that from this moment on, the master of the sword is him. Guards scream at their prince to stop and to put the sword back. They shout that no one but the king may touch it. Half awake and thoroughly annoyed, Gruhorn wonders in his head what insolent fool is rattling his body. When he finally gets a look at the man holding him, all he can think is that this pig cannot possibly be a prince. The plump young man in silk waves Gruhorn around and shouts that there is nothing in this whole country he cannot touch. Gruhorn cracks open his authority, which he calls judgment, and pulls up the boy's information. Adrian Leonberg, male, 15 years old, aptitude none. His traits stack up badly: arrogance and morbid obesity, and uncoordinated and lecherous, and laziness, and pushover, and mana sensitivity disorder. The Leonberg name lands the hardest of all. This ridiculous kid is his comrade's own bloodline, and this is the potential the descendant of the Sword Saint has been reduced to. Adrian, meanwhile, is thinking only of himself. He raises the sword and calls out loud to the great Dragon Slayer, begging for a share of that ancient strength. Gruhorn silently asks the world if this idiot has lost his mind, since no power in his hilt is going to a guy like this. Adrian's temper snaps, and he screams the sword's name up to the ceiling, and then screams it again even louder. Guards shriek and beg him to calm down. They remind him that a sword must never be drawn inside the palace. He roars back that he will kill anyone who dares order him around. Just as he swings at a guard with the promise that trash will die today, the blade twists on its own. In one clean motion, Gruhorn drives straight through his would-be master's chest instead. Blood spills across the polished floor. Guards cry out for a physician, dumbfounded that the one the sword stabbed turned out to be the prince himself. Adrian's vision blurs, and inside that swaying body, Gruhorn thinks with quiet disbelief that at this rate he might just faint for the first time in his entire life as a sword. By the time our boy wakes up, everything has changed. Gruhorn is now inside Adrian Leonberg. Rumor drifts through the palace in low whispers. The notorious first prince inherited not a speck of royal talent, and his greed sat at the top of the whole kingdom. That stupid, lazy, cruel pig ate through the kingdom's future for years. And now at last he has been stabbed by his own hand and returned from the border of death, a strangely quiet man. Attendants murmur that surely he is only lying low out of shame, and that any day now he will be flipping over dining tables again and rounding up his gang of delinquents. The person they are gossiping about has no interest in any of it. Alone in his chair, Gruhorn stares up at the sword above him. He cannot help thinking that he killed his comrade's descendant and stole the boy's body. Servants rush in soon after, panicking that the king has arrived and begging him to fix his attire. Gruhorn mutters bitterly that the man never bothered to visit while this body was dying, and then why now? A sharp-eyed servant softly warns him that the royal knights outside have very good hearing. Before the king enters, an old silver-haired man in a red cape steps in and dismisses the attendants. He notes dryly that the prince has come back from the dead with the exact same rotten temper. When our boy stares at him blankly and asks who this is, the old man's face falls. The teacher reminds him that they share the bond of master and student, and now he cannot even pretend to know his own master. Gruhorn plays it careful and murmurs that his memory is a mess. Maybe he remembers and maybe he does not. The herald cuts in and announces that His Majesty the King has entered. Gruhorn quickly guesses this must be the scoundrel's father. When he takes one look at the man who steps in, he cannot hide a small surprised note in his voice. He had assumed that after so many generations the lion's blood of Leon Burke had thinned down to nothing, but this king carries himself better than that. The king does not accept even a greeting from his son. Instead, he speaks in a low, tired voice. He tells him that everyone makes wrong choices. A man may even commit acts everyone will condemn, but if he learns from those mistakes, that too is a kind of growth. But you have forgotten every single one of those mistakes, the king continues. Since it has all become as if none of it ever happened, you have not moved forward one single step, and you never will. Attendants begged the king to calm himself. Gruhorn keeps a straight face, while inside he groans that he has really stepped in something awful. The king finishes by declaring that forget being treated like a prince, because this son of his will not even be treated like a human. The moment the king turns his back, Gruhorn silently asks what on earth this kid had been doing for 15 years to earn a lecture that harsh. Then the queen sweeps in and turns the whole mood upside down. She calls him Ian in a soft, doting voice and insists his memory will come back to him soon. She tells him that the trivial past hardly matters if he does not remember it. She wails over his beautiful face being wasted away, and then catches herself mid-sentence and wonders aloud where exactly it has been wasted. Then she reminds him 100 times over that he must never touch such dangerous objects again. Gruhorn silently apologizes since her real son is already dead. She kisses her boy on the forehead and promises to come see him again and tells him to rest well and finally leaves. Alone in the moonlit chamber, our boy lets out a long, tired breath. His comrade begged him to look after his descendants, and instead, he ended up killing one of them. It was not intentional, but he is the one who ended the boy's life. Since it has already turned out this way, there is only one thing left for him to do. He will have to live well for the dead guy's share too. Reincarnated as a sword, he thinks quietly. He has spent his entire existence cleaning up after other people. This body is fat and has no talent, but that does not matter. He knows exactly how many kids he has raised into legends over the centuries. He can raise one more, and this time it is going to be himself. The first task is to forge a mana heart. Our boy sits cross-legged on the cold floor and pulls blue mana into the fat prince's chest. For a heartbeat it holds. Then it scatters, and this body simply refuses to accept it. Sweat pours down his face as he tries again, and then again, with his jaw locked and hands trembling with effort. But nothing takes root inside his chest. He collapses onto his knees, gasping for breath, and stares in disbelief at the disaster of a body he has been handed. Under his breath, he cannot help but wonder just what the hell kind of body he has ended up in. Alive. The morning starts with Gruhorn cursing at the ceiling and asking what the hell is really wrong with this body. If he still had his original body, he tells himself bitterly, he could just force mana through it and fix a constitution this week in a single afternoon. Instead, he is stuck sweating through the fat prince's shirt for a single drop of blue light. A soft knock cuts through his tantrum. A nervous young maid steps in and apologizes for the intrusion. She explains that the queen has sent a restorative medicine specially for him. It will taste bitter, she warns, but it will be very good for his body, so please consider Her Majesty's feelings. Then she gulps and quietly hopes to herself that this time the prince will not throw the bowl at her. Our boy's eyes lock onto that bowl. Deep red liquid, warm to look at and glowing at the edge. That thing contains mana. Without a word, he grabs the bowl and drinks the whole draft down in one long pull. The maid stares in absolute silence. He slams the empty bowl onto the tray and tells her flatly that he is satisfied and she can go now. She stumbles out with a shaky acknowledgement. The moment the door closes, he sits cross-legged and pulls the fresh mana into his chest, and it settles right in without a fight. The amount is still nowhere near enough, and the little pool scatters after a single day, but at least it takes. He calls the maid back and asks in the softest voice he can manage if she has any more of that. Mon kroproken helmed some. A few days later, our boy stares at his fat little hand as a solid clump of blue mana churns in his palm. Finally, he can forge a mana heart. He has done this for other people countless times before, so making one for himself should be almost thoughtless. He raises his hand and starts to say he can pull it off with his eyes closed. Then the pain hits him all at once. His chest catches fire in an instant. It feels like his ribs are about to explode. He grits his teeth and reminds himself that making a mana heart was always supposed to hurt like this. If he loses consciousness now, the mana will backflow and finish him off for good. He seizes the wild clump inside him and tells himself there is no need to rush. He guides the flow along the path of the heart, to the right, slow and steady. He lets the new heart permeate inside him drop by drop. Then all at once it settles into place inside his chest. This time it is not a mana heart shaped for someone else's body. It is a mana heart for him, and him alone. He punches the air and shouts that he did it, and that it is complete. A pale gold box of light flashes in front of his face. It reads that mana heart has been created. He stares at the words. That is a status window, and it is the exact same kind of message he used to send to his own masters back when he was still a sword. Why on earth is one showing up for him now? The next line writes itself into the air. Restoring connection to the origin. Connection restored, but the connection status is poor and extremely unstable. Most of his old authorities are unavailable, and only a few can still be used. Authority Judgment is now available for extremely limited use. Authority Third Eye is now available for extremely limited use, and he can see and hear a little better than before. The young man blinks at the glowing letters in front of him. Trees rustle outside the window, and the leaves suddenly look sharper than they have any right to be. He tilts his head toward the door. Two servants are whispering in the corridor about the prince, and one of them murmurs that if this was the old His Highness, he would already have thrown a huge fit by now. Gruhorn breaks into a small delighted smile that he can even eavesdrop through solid wood. Then a jolt of pressure hits his head. His internal mana has been fully depleted, and the system is force terminating his use of the authorities. He slumps down and thinks with a wry grin that this is what extremely limited was supposed to mean. He remembers what it was like as a sword. Absolute senses in every direction, with no blind spot at all, catching every squirrel and every dragon on the same wind. That version of him is gone now. For now, squeezing a tiny amount of magic out of this fat body only buys him a bit of extra sight and a bit of extra hearing. Things should change once he expands his mana pool. His stomach growls hard enough to shake the sheet. He mutters that he is hungry, and the maid outside pipes up that food will be brought at once. First things first, he thinks. He needs to focus on adapting to this human body. Later, the queen sweeps back in under a shower of sunlight and coos over him. She says how admirable it is that he finished every last drop of the medicine his poor mother sent. She squishes his cheeks and tells him he must finally understand how to treasure his own body. Then she remembers herself and asks brightly if he recognizes who this is. A tall man in a dark cape steps forward with a sharp face and dark mustache and cold eyes. Gruhorn answers flatly that no, he does not. The queen sighs that he really has lost his memory. She turns to the man and begs her brother to help this child. After all, he is his one and only nephew. The uncle does not soften even a little. He tells his sister that she speaks as though this boy lost something important, but the past was not exactly a good one anyway. Just by looking, he can already tell the child does not like him. He would like to make one thing clear. All he is willing to do for the prince is help him melt off a bit of that flab. He cannot offer anything beyond that, so any useless expectations should be dropped right here and now. The queen stammers that even that much is more than enough. The uncle warns her flatly not to forget that sentiment. By that evening, our boy finds himself standing on a training ground in a plain shirt while the uncle circles around him. From now on, the uncle announces eating and drinking and even breathing will require his permission. If the prince expects to be treated like a prince here, he can give up on the whole idea right now. Then he adds with a mocking edge that if the boy tries his very best, who knows what might happen. Perhaps he will change his mind one day and even teach him a shred of the family's secret swordsmanship. Gruhorn hears that and thinks silently and dryly how ridiculous. This uncle is offering to teach a shred of the family's swordsmanship to him. to the very instructor who taught the undefeated knight and personally raised the founding king who built this whole country. The uncle catches the tremble running through his belly and remarks that seeing all that fat shake the boy must be resentful. Our boy meets his eyes and speaks up softly with a single word, "Uncle." Then he lays it out plainly. He proposes they make a bet. Within half a year he will make the man acknowledge him. If he fails, he will do whatever the uncle says without a word of complaint. If he wins, however, the uncle must grant him a single wish. Inside, Gruhorn quietly tells himself he needs to break that arrogant look out of the man's eyes. The uncle stares at him for a long beat, and then his face cracks into a slow smile. He says it is interesting and agrees to the terms. He should have at least one source of entertainment in his life. The training begins on the spot. Gruhorn talked big, but the moment he starts moving, he is wheezing badly. This damn body, he curses inside. He has to use mana. First he will focus it on burning the fat all over his body. The uncle's head snaps around. He mutters, asking if that brat actually did what he thinks he did. The uncle covers the ground between them in a single blink. He demands to know if Adrian actually created a mana heart. Gruhorn glances down at the soft blue glow inside his chest and answers casually that yes, he made one a little while ago. Then he asks with a bland smile if the uncle has already come to regret their bet. The man is not amused at all. He asks what in the world Adrian was thinking forging a mana heart. Scratch that, he says. Where on earth did he even learn the method for forging one? Looking at his student, he already knows the boy did something wrong. He fixes Gruhorn with a hard stare and finally spits out the answer. A mana heart, he tells him, is a crude technique that only low-level mercenaries ever bother to learn. The guy's face freezes on the spot. His eyes go wide and sweat beads down his forehead. One small cracked word escapes him. What? Outside the castle walls, that single word echoes off the towers as the story crashes to its end. Oh. The uncle stares down at the boy in front of him and murmurs that it really is the end of an era. A mana heart, he repeats, is a crude technique that only low-level mercenaries bother to learn. Gruhorn's face pales as he asks what on earth the man is even talking about. Rather than explain, the uncle tells him it will be faster to show him and orders him to watch closely. Blue light gathers around the uncle's hand, but not in the shape of a heart. It spins itself into rings, one after another, cool and steady, hovering around an invisible blade. These are mana chains, he explains, and they carry the property of shattering the sword energy of a mana heart at the source. Beyond that, they are far easier to build and far more stable than any mana heart ever was. He recalls with a bored voice that even the Eli family, who stubbornly clung to mana hearts, fell into complete ruin about 100 years ago. These days, no one even bothers to try a mana heart anymore. That night, our boy reads the book his uncle drops in front of him. It is called Mana Chain Basic Theory. Mages, it says, use circles to gather their magic, and knights weave chains to gather their mana. A knight's stage is divided by the number of chains he can weave: single chain and double chain, and triple chain and quad chain, and at the very top, pentachain. Gruhorn snorts under his breath and admits with a small smirk that this is not quite complete nonsense. Then his eye falls on the author's name printed at the top of the page. It is spelled out as Ernest Altring. He rolls the name around in his mind, quietly murmuring Altring to himself. He has heard that name somewhere before. Then it clicks all at once. A very long time ago, back when he was still a sword, a young man with strange, restless eyes had walked up to him. The boy had asked if this was that famous sword saint. He had declared his name as Ernest Altring and said he had come to see who is more worthy of the name Sword Saint. The kid had come at him using arts that were neither swordsmanship nor magic. Gruhorn shakes himself back to the present and mutters that no wonder the name felt familiar. He hums a little to himself and wonders out loud whatever happened to that guy. The next morning, our boy stands on the training ground while the uncle circles around him with sharp, watchful eyes. He asks if Adrian read the book last night, and then he pushes the point harder. Now that the prince surely must have grasped the situation, he must also understand just how foolish a choice he has made. Gruhorn shrugs and answers calmly that no, he does not feel he made a mistake in the slightest. At that answer, the uncle's face darkens over. He asks if that is stubbornness, or if the boy still does not understand what is happening. Blue mana rings snap into being over his open palm as he lowers his voice. Not all mana hearts are the same mana heart, he says. Then he cuts through with a phrase, difference in class. He asks if him has ever even heard of it. He tells Gruhorn that every so often mercenaries pop up who fool themselves into believing they are some hero from centuries ago. He asks if the prince knows what happened to all of them. Every last one of them fell away, unable even to surpass 2 rings. After that harsh warning, his tone shifts into something almost like an offer. If, however, the prince really believes he is different from those fools, he should try defeating a double-chain knight. If he can pull that off, the uncle will become his guardian exactly as his mother wishes. The young man tilts his head and asks bluntly if having his uncle as his guardian is even a good thing for him. He says honestly he is not so sure about it. The air freezes over the training ground. The uncle stares at his nephew and asks if he just questioned the man's qualifications to be his guardian. He answers the question himself with a low, steady pride. He is a count of the kingdom and the commander of the northern army. He is the master of the Black Lancers and one of the 5 silver lions who serve his majesty directly. He is a knight who has woven 4 rings, a quad-chain knight. His name, he says, and the words seem to press down on the air itself, is Vale Balorhard. That he tells his nephew is the name of the man who may stand behind him, and he asks in a level voice if that is sufficient qualification. Steel meets steel a heartbeat later. Gruhorn barely parries the strike in time. Guards shout at the count to stand down, and our boy grins through the shock. He warns his uncle right to his face not to go back on his word later. A short while later, the training ends with a flat announcement that will be all for today. Gruhorn crawls off the ground, barely alive, and thinks he nearly died in there for real. Balorhard watches him limp away and tells him with a slow, cruel smile that to think this boy actually challenged him, believing that kind of grit would earn recognition, is almost impressive. Double chain, the count adds, is a joke. The prince would be lucky to even beat a single chain. The guy drags himself down the corridor, cursing the devilish bastard under his breath the whole way. He almost makes it back to his room before an old, careful voice stops him. Someone says, "Your Highness," and that he has been waiting for him. It is the royal physician, small and stooped with a very careful smile on his lips. Gruhorn blinks at him and asks the doctor why he is even here. The physician answers softly that he is honored the prince remembers a lowly one such as himself. Behind him, an attendant explains that Her Majesty the Queen has ordered healing magic to be cast on His Highness at once. The physician steps forward with a warm green glow already blooming in his palm. Our boy panics on the spot. He shouts and waves him off with both hands. He says he does not need it, and everyone can just get out already. The physician and the guards fly out of the room in a panic. Behind the closed door, Gruhorn mutters bitterly that the whole point of the hell he went through today would be wasted if he let them heal him now. He turns around and there is already someone else standing in the hall watching him. A slim young man in a deep red robe watches him with a cool half-smile on his face. The attendant beside Gruhorn stiffens and murmurs quickly that this one is His Highness, the third prince. Gruhorn's eyebrows lift a little. So, this is the third prince, and that guy the servants whisper about. The brother speaks up first. He says he heard his older brother had an accident, but he is looking better than expected. What a shame that is, really. Gruhorn cuts through the pleasantries and asks flatly what it is the boy wants to say. The third prince clicks his tongue and mutters that, of course, the older brother has come to pick a fight. A prince must simply have nothing better to do with his day. Inside, Gruhorn shoots back a silent line about how the fool who stuck a sword into his own body has no room to lecture anyone about behavior. Then the third prince finally gets to the point of his visit. He says he heard a very interesting piece of news, with a slow, easy smile spreading across his face. He heard that the first prince has made a bet with Count Balorhard, something about dueling a double-chain knight. About that, he adds, leaning down until his shadow falls across his older brother's face. He asks how his big brother would like him as his opponent. The dining hall settles back into silence after the third prince and his attendants finally sweep out. Gruhorn sets down his spoon and asks flatly what the hell that guy was just now. He really wants to know why the Leonberg descendants all seem to be like that. His uncle answers without missing a beat. That is His Highness, the third Prince Gilliam, and he is renowned for his talent in swordsmanship since childhood. He wove 2 rings together at just 14 years old, which makes him remarkably quick for his age. Gruhorn nearly chokes on his food and asks in disbelief if that punk really did that. Balorhard nods once at the reaction. Our boy mutters back that really now and files that piece of news away for later use. Before he can chew on the news any longer, a nervous attendant steps in and apologizes for the interruption. She announces that a stack of letters has arrived for His Highness. She lays down a small mountain of paper on the table. Gruhorn stares at the pile and asks why on earth all these guys who never gave a damn about this body before suddenly want to send anything now. He rustles through the top one and then the next. Each one is basically the same. They say, "Please forgive the incident last time. If your highness is having trouble finding a dueling partner, please give them the opportunity first." Every single letter is a formal request to duel him. In short, our boy realizes this is a whole line of scoundrels who saw a chance to legally beat up the notorious pig prince. A slow, wicked smile spreads across his face at the thought. Looks like he has become quite the easy target for these guys. He calls the maid over and tells her to grab a pen. He orders her calmly to write down every single name that sent a letter today. Later out on the training ground, a plain wooden training sword drops in front of him with a hollow thud. He blinks down at it. Balorhard tells him coldly to pick the sword up. He needs at least a shred of real swordsmanship for the bet to even stand, does he not? The uncle refuses to hear excuses later about how the prince lost, only because no one ever taught him the basics. Balorhard adds under his breath that the boy could have just handed the sword to him nicely instead of forcing this, and comments on his sour personality. Gruhorn grunts and hauls the training sword up, while his sore muscles scream at him. "Do, vervs amnesel." The moment the pain hits, he groans out loud about his muscles hurting so badly. Balorhard pauses and asks him quietly if he did not receive healing magic earlier from the physician. If the boy calls himself a knight, he ought to know this well. Healing magic only restores muscles to the state they were in before, and it does absolutely nothing at all to help them actually grow. The young man's eyes widen slightly at that. His uncle sighs and admits this was not what he wanted to talk about today anyway. He warns his student that he does not plan to demonstrate this next thing more than once, so watch closely. Then the uncle raises his own blade. This, he says, is the technique the kingdom's knights learn to build their foundation on. This is the kingdom's training sword. The blade moves the moment he raises it. It cuts a clean arc through the air and twists and returns to its starting point, precise and steady. Every strike carries the exact weight of the basics, nothing wasted and nothing flashy about it. He raises his sword once more and unleashes one final slash. This time, the strike sweeps through the air, stirring the surrounding winds into a miniature whirlwind. Gruhorn watches without blinking as the movements roll past his eyes, and something inside him goes very cold and very still. He asks slowly if the uncle just said this style is what knights learn to build their foundation on. Balorhard confirms it with a simple nod. It may lack sharpness because it is only a training sword, he explains, but it stays faithful to the basics, so there is no better foundation for learning the sword. Considering the boy's talent, he adds with a small shrug, it might even be too much for him. Phew. Our boy starts to laugh. Actually laugh hard and helpless, doubled over the training sword. Balorhard stares at him, honestly confused. Gruhorn wipes his eyes and thinks to himself that no matter how much time has passed, this is a joke that only the world could pull off. The Dragon Slayer. The great swordsmanship that once beheaded the mad dragon itself is being treated in this kingdom as some trivial training sword technique for baby knights. Balorhard clears his throat and tries to move on. Of course, he says, this style alone will not be enough to win the bet. After the boy masters the basics, he can beg his mother to hire a proper teacher. There is no need, Gruhorn cuts in. He will not learn any other swordsmanship at all, because that style alone is more than enough. Balorhard studies him for a long moment and then only tells him to do as he pleases with it. Alone with the training sword, our boy swings it slowly and thinks about why the modern world treats the Dragon Slayer as worn-out junk. The truth, he decides quietly, is that this current version of the Dragon Slayer style lacks the will to slay dragons. Those who threw away the mana heart also forgot how to pour their own will into the blade. Without that will, they simply cannot see what makes the Dragon Slayer what it truly is. Phew. The uncle steps back in and knocks his stance aside with a single tap of his blade. Power does not go into the sword just because he tenses his arms up, Balorhard tells him coldly. Has the prince already forgotten what he was just shown a moment ago? The strength has to come from the belly and from the legs as well. Gruhorn goes down with a hard grunt. His uncle explains that a real swordsman must channel strength correctly through the whole body in order to actually wield the blade. The guy nods to himself in the dust and mutters that right. This current body is only a weak, clumsy thing, mimicking even a fake Dragon Slayer style at best. But he will prove that the real Dragon Slayer is not some worn-out old junk to be thrown away. One day passes into 2, and then into 3. Before he knows it, a whole week has slipped by. And then a whole month goes by after that. Somewhere in the middle of that grind, a status message writes itself across his vision. He has succeeded in changing his constitution through arduous training. The trait morbid obesity has been changed to general obesity. His metabolism now runs more actively thanks to the shift. He has grown somewhat used to using his body from repeating the same drills over and over. Then another message follows the first. The trait clumsy has vanished entirely, and the effect of exercise on him increases significantly. A third window blooms into view. His constitution has changed again after consistently accumulating mana over the month. The trait mana sensitivity disorder has disappeared for good, and a new trait mana sensitivity has been created cleanly in its place. He keeps swinging without breaking his rhythm. He swings more naturally than he did a month ago. He swings stronger than he did yesterday. He swings more perfectly than he did only a moment ago. Somewhere behind him a voice yells at him to stop. Then it yells louder still, asking, did he not hear the man tell him to stop this instant? A hand catches his blade cold. Gruhorn blinks up through the rain, dazed and half lost. He murmurs a single word, Uncle. The wooden training sword in his uncle's grip splinters and cracks apart between them, and a thin line of blood runs down Balorhard's palm from where the edge bit into him. Now, he's noticed what he's done in a few days. The uncle glares down at his nephew, drenched to the bone and honestly furious now. He snaps at the boy and calls him a stupid fool. Training on a day like this, in weather like this? If he had been a real blade in the boy's hands right then, the prince would not have escaped unscathed. A gold message flashes softly in Gruhorn's vision. He has completely awakened from a state of extreme concentration. However, the body still remembers that extreme sensation from a moment ago. A new trait, hyperfocus, has been created and added to his window. Our boy blinks and lets out a small breathy laugh. If he focuses like that twice in a row, he thinks weakly he might genuinely get struck by lightning and die out here in the rain. His attendants rush up crying out for him. Balorhard just turns without another word and pulls his soaked nephew along beside him through the storm. He mutters one last thing under his breath as they walk. Foolish brat, he says, and the two of them fade into the rain. Gruhorn's eyes flutter open in the quiet of his own bedroom, and for a long moment he cannot remember when he lost consciousness in the first place. He sits up slowly and presses a hand to his forehead. He admits to himself that he did not know the limits of this body until now. As a sword, he had already achieved every accomplishment a weapon could ever hope for. The nameless war hero, and the swordmaster, and the mercenary king, and the founder of the kingdom. Every one of those titles he built through someone else. He guided them into legend by leading wars to victory and lifting up their bodies and their souls. Gruhorn was always a wise advisor and an excellent teacher, but always a third party to the actual glory. Now in his own two hands he is finally the one sweating for it, and he cannot help wanting to make all of that hard labor his own for once. Our boy stares down at his palms and warns himself out loud that at this rate this weak body will break down in no time at all. He needs to balance the mind and the body together. It has been over a month since he first formed his mana heart. He has gathered quite a bit of mana in that time, so he should be able to move on to the next stage soon. He sits cross-legged on the bed and breathes out slowly and pulls the mana inward. Blue light rolls across his skin. A soft gold window blooms in front of him. Through consistent effort, he has successfully gathered mana to a certain level. His body can now withstand a little more mana. His mana heart has expanded. His constitution has changed again in response to that expansion. He grins wide at the messages and mutters that it is done at last. Then he adds under his breath that he wants to see what this can actually do. He slides his training sword out and takes a slow test swing. Another window flashes past his eyes. He has reached the rank of sword learner. He can now use the most basic level of aura. A cool blue light wraps his blade. The young man smiles at it and murmurs to himself that with this he can at least handle the basics now. The next day he walks the palace grounds beside his uncle. Balarhard tells him flatly that rumors are widespread throughout the whole kingdom. Gruhorn asks what rumors he means. About that bet of his, the uncle answers. Thanks to it, even the Count himself has become quite annoyed with all the noise. Would it not be better to just find a dual opponent quickly and settle it? Gruhorn scratches his head and admits that, as for the opponent, he has already decided exactly who it will be, though he keeps the name Prince Gilliam locked behind his teeth for now. More importantly, he adds, it will be hard for him to face a double chain right away. How about he duels some single chain guys first to warm up? Balarhard tells him coldly that this is up to him. Then Gruhorn calls out to his attendant Carl and asks what about that thing he asked for the other day. Carl steps forward with a small stack of papers and bows deeply. He reports that yes, he has organized it exactly as requested. This is the list of everyone who sent a formal duel request to His Highness. Balarhard's eyes narrow at the sight of the list. However, he presses and asks if the prince perhaps intends to actually hold practice duels with these people. Gruhorn shrugs and asks, so what if he does? His uncle's voice drops lower. Most of these people hold a serious personal grudge against His Highness. They may well try to harm him under the honest guise of a duel. Our boy nods calmly and answers that he knows exactly. That is precisely why he says and looks his uncle straight in the eye. Uncle, he tells him, must referee for him. He is not asking for anything grand at all. Just stop anyone from actually dying during the duels. Uncle can grant him a favor of that size, right? A few days later, on the day of the first duel, a young man in a plain traveling coat stands outside the first prince's palace, staring up at the front gate. This is the palace where that scoundrel lives, he thinks bitterly. His name is Taylor Tailheim, and he is the second son of an ordinary baron family from the countryside. A few years ago, at a royal banquet, his father and older brother had traveled all the way to attend the fat first prince, took one look at them, and started laughing at them. Adrian had cried out for the whole ballroom to hear that from his clothes to his attitude. The man reeks of a country bumpkin. Look at him all excited, just because he made it to a royal banquet at last. The family's honor fell to the floor that very day. Taylor's father and older brother became the laughingstock of the entire nobility, and they remain the laughingstock even to this day. Taylor grips his sword hard and swears to himself that today Adrian Leonberg will finally pay dearly for that afternoon. At the duel field, the young baron's son bows stiffly and offers his greetings to His Highness First Prince Adrian Leonberg. He introduces himself as Taylor, the second son of the Tailheim family, a single-chain apprentice knight and a practitioner of House Tailheim's swordsmanship. Gruhorn scratches his ear and thinks to himself that this is awfully formal for a practice match. It is not even a real formal duel. Around the field, attendants whisper that this Adrian really does look weak and that he is rude and arrogant, just like the rumors said. They say he clearly has no sense of his place. Balarhard cuts through the whispers and tells them enough. He understands how they feel, but the duel has not even started yet, and they should pull their spirit back. Taylor's head snaps around and his eyes go wide at the sight of the Count. He stammers that it is an incredible honor to meet Lord Balarhard. The Count nods politely and answers that, yes, nice to meet him too. The guy watches the whole exchange sourly and thinks that someone watching all this might honestly think his uncle is the prince here. Balarhard, without missing a beat, tells his nephew that this is exactly why he should have behaved himself better in the past. Gruhorn mutters that the man is always bringing up the past at every turn. Then Balarhard orders both of them to take their positions. The duel will now begin. Steel meets steel a heartbeat later. Taylor charges in with a blue mana chain wound around his blade. He warns His Highness to please be careful and swings hard at him. He moves fast and he moves aggressively at every angle. But to Gruhorn's eyes, the whole flurry is stuffed with too many useless movements. Our boy parries the strike cleanly, and his own blue aura blade rings against the chain with a strange, soft chime. Taylor's face goes white all at once. He chokes out a sound and stares down at the sword edge between them. This is a mana heart. All around the field, attendants gasp that a mana heart should not be able to block a mana chain at all. Then they wonder aloud among themselves if it might be because Taylor only has one ring so far. Gruhorn grins across at Taylor and tells him that, honestly, it just feels a bit tingly on his side. A different sound rises up out of Gruhorn's sword then, a low singing tone underneath the clash of blades. Balarhard's head snaps up at once. He murmurs to himself with a jolt of recognition, asking if that is sword resonance he is hearing right now. Taylor stares in horror at the blade and whispers that it cannot be. Then he screams it out loud. It cannot be. He charges again in a fury. Their swords collide with a crash, and blue energy rips outward from the point of contact. The two swords collide, filling the air with the sharp clang of steel against steel. After the devastating clash, both fighters are forced to step back and catch their breath. Ballerhard watches with a hard expression and thinks that people always said ring mana is fundamentally incompatible with heart mana. Now he sees firsthand that the old saying is indeed correct. Gruhorn grips his own chest as a wave of pressure builds inside him. Mana backflow could hit him at any moment now, he feels. However, his head lifts up in defiance of that pressure anyway. He looks at Taylor across the field with a new light in his eyes and asks slowly if the boy just said he was the second son of Baron Talheim. The young knight blinks in confusion at the shift in tone. Gruhorn tells him plainly that he needs to cool his head a bit, and that inside himself he needs to focus on the senses. Something deep in him stirs awake. Whether people call it a demon sword or a holy sword or any of the countless other names it has carried over the centuries, that thing is a part of his own soul. A gold window flashes into being in front of him. The mana heart has accepted a colossal will. That colossal will explodes the dormant mana heart wide open from the inside. The long-sleeping will to slay dragons awakens inside him. The memory of the sword from its most recent activity comes rushing back through him. And with it comes the very essence of the heart crafted for the sole purpose of slaying dragons. Another window drops into place beside the first. The Dragon Slayer's heart has been activated. He opens his eyes. A deep red aura tears out of Gruhorn's chest and wraps itself around his blade. It takes the ghostly shape of a great dragon rearing behind him. Forged for the sake of slaying dragons, this is the true power of the dragon-slaying sword. The final window blooms into view. The energy flowing from the Dragon Slayer's heart has merged completely with the dragon-slaying sword itself. Taylor stares at the red glow across the field and stammers, asking just what in the world that thing is. Ballerhard, for the first time in this whole training arc, looks genuinely alarmed. He throws up a hand and shouts at the top of his lungs for them to stop. A single red slash cuts across the chapter's final moment. Our boy stands with one eye glowing a deep murderous crimson. The story crashes to its end before the strike even lands home. Our boy's mana heart has just transformed into the Dragon Slayer's heart, and red aura floods the training ground. Vale Ballerhard sees the shape of a dragon coiling around his nephew and understands at once that this sword is dangerous. He roars at Adrian to stop, but the moment carries a memory. Right before the practice duel began, our boy had leaned in and asked his uncle for one favor. If it looks like he is about to kill his opponent, Adrian had told him, then his uncle must stop him. Ballerhard raises his own blade and wraps it in cold blue chain mana and cuts across the tide of red. The two forces collide with a sound that rips through the courtyard. Taylor Talheim, half dead on his feet after 3 days of blocking uncontrolled killing intent, collapses into the dust. Adrian stands for one more heartbeat with his sword still raised, and then his uncle's counterstrike lands and drops him. The onlookers panic. One of them cries out that Count Ballerhard has attacked the first prince, and that depending on the circumstances he could be charged with regicide. Ballerhard tells them all to stand back. He says Adrian asked him to do it. Someone kneels beside Adrian and whispers his name. Adrian coughs a spot of blood onto his own lip and manages a lazy grin. He points out that yes, he did ask his uncle for the favor, but he never said anything about being knocked out. The attendants shout for the prince. Later, Adrian sits alone and thinks through what just happened. His mana heart nearly cracked from that one strike. Uncle's power is nothing like a single chain nobody's, and he took a direct hit from it. Fortunately, there do not seem to be any lasting side effects, but still. Then he smiles to himself. Well, it all worked out in the end. He won the duel after all. The smile lasts about 2 seconds before Ballerhard walks into the room. His uncle demands to know what he is smiling about and what brings him all the way here. He asks what on earth Adrian did. Ballerhard's face darkens as he presses the question. He snaps and asks what that unrighteous sword was. He never taught Adrian such a sword style. Adrian answers calmly that he was merely being faithful to the essence of the sword. Ballerhard falls silent for a long beat. Then he tells our boy that talking about the sword when he has never even seen real combat is quite something. So the essence of the sword as Adrian conceives it is killing intent. He admits that while it is flagrant and uncomfortable, it is also a truth. He tells his nephew that this is unexpected. Balerhard confesses he thought Adrian would lecture him about the path of the sword or the path of perfection and drone out a long righteous rant. But no, he states plainly what he actually is. He is a soldier, not a knight. He walks the path of victory rather than the path of righteousness. He acknowledges his nephew's answer but adds that Adrian's sword still goes too far. If the killing intent burns that hot, he warns, then Adrian will fail to distinguish friend from foe. And that Balerhard understands now is why our boy has been kicking up all this fuss to fix it. Adrian meets his uncle's eyes with a small smile. Balerhard tells him he will watch. He will see whether Adrian is consumed by his inner demon or not. After the 3 days of practice, duels finally end. Adrian calls Taylor Tailheim over one last time. He asks if Taylor said his name was Taylor Tailheim, and then tells the young knight that he has done good work over the last 3 days. Internally, he thinks that Taylor had to block a sword screaming with uncontrolled killing intent for 3 whole days, so he really did go through a lot. Then he softens the edge. It is a shame, is it not, he says. Taylor would have felt better if he could have at least kicked his ass once, but he could not. Taylor stammers in response. Adrian orders that a chest be brought over. A servant steps forward with a small wooden case. Taylor asks in confusion what this is. Adrian tells him he heard he did some terrible things to Taylor and his family in the past. He does not know if this will make up for it, but Taylor should take this to Baron Tailheim. It is not much, and just some gold and a letter. Now go on, he says. Travel safely. As Taylor walks off clutching the chest, Adrian thinks to himself that he has no obligation to fix the messes that scoundrel Adrian made. Still, if you make someone work, you should pay the price. Taylor turns back with real feeling and thanks His Highness. The scoundrel prince's practice duel becomes a hot topic across the kingdom. His arrogance dug his own grave, the nobles whisper. The first prince will surely pay dearly for his past misdeeds. Idle young lords gather to gossip and wonder how much humiliation he must have suffered. But days pass and the news people expected never arrives. Instead, when someone finally asks Taylor Tailheim how the duel actually went, Taylor answers that there seemed to be some kind of misunderstanding. The first prince was not as bad as the rumors said. Both sides did their best in the duel, and that is all. When a listener presses him about being threatened, Taylor snaps back that he merely came to know His Highness's sincerity. The gossiping nobles stare in shock. Someone whispers that the royal family must have silenced them. Tom de Boule. The person who reacts to this news turns out to be a red-faced fat noble roaring across a hall that Adrian only kept his mouth shut because he was embarrassed that he lost to him. Adrian, sitting nearby, sighs that these nobles really have nothing better to do. They should do something productive with that time. Carl, standing next to him, notes dryly that His Highness is one to talk. The young man's expression darkens. He walks over to the sputtering noble and leans in close with dark aura curling around his shoulders. He tells the noble softly that when he goes out, he should make sure to spread the results of the duel too. The fat noble stammers that he will do so. Adrian leans back, satisfied. He asks if the rumors should die down now. Carl says nothing for a beat and then admits carefully that there is a rumor that His Highness threatened him to fabricate the duel results. Adrian falls silent. He grits out that they should forget it. Forget it. They should just train, and train he does. Sword strokes cut clean lines through the courtyard. Blue aura wraps the blade with growing precision, and the plump body, that used to stumble now, moves with intent. Adrian asks Carl how many duel opponents are left. Carl reports that the one coming today is the last. The guy mutters that apprentice knights are not enough for him anymore. Carl notes that the last one, though, is different. This one is a knight who properly learned the sword, someone not satisfied with merely polishing the family's sword arts, but a talent who joined a knighthood to train. A probation knight of the Iron Lion Knights. Carl announces the name, Arwen Kurgayan. Outside, the guards murmur as she approaches. They confirm that it is her from the Iron Lion Knight's emblem on the armor. Titles trail her name. Flower of the Cliff and Thorny Rose, and the one who broke the hearts of all men. Even hardened onlookers cannot help remarking that she is definitely a great beauty. To think even a woman like that came here on her own, they say, means the prince has quite the ability. A tall figure in iron lion armor steps into the courtyard with dark hair falling around a serious face and silver plating catching the light. Would it not be truly laughable if the prince gets humiliated by that woman? Before Arwen even reaches the center of the training ground, everyone around Adrian remembers what the Iron Lion Knights actually mean. They are renowned as one of the kingdom's top orders in both fame and skill. And the probation knight now approaching Arwen Kurgayan is a promising talent whose official membership has already been confirmed. Our boy watches her advance and cannot help wondering why a genius of that caliber would come all the way here just to seek a practice duel with him. He turns quietly to Carl and asks. Carl clears his throat and admits carefully that there was a slight misunderstanding between His Highness and Sir Arwen in the past. Adrian pinches the bridge of his nose. He mutters that misunderstanding is foot. Knowing the original Adrian, he probably picked a fight unilaterally. He points at Carl and orders him to spell it out. What did he do back then? Carl stiffens. Then Carl says it. His Highness harassed Sir Arwen. Adrian nearly tears his hair out and roars at the ghost of the original Adrian, cursing him as a crazy bastard. The memory Carl lays out is exactly as bad as our boy fears. Years ago, at a royal function, the original prince had cornered Arwen and asked if her name really was Arwen. He had leered that she was quite pretty, just as the rumor said, and offered that if she wished she could come in as his personal maid. The knights surrounding Arwen had cut him off cold and told him that the knights of the kingdom are not his private property. And that little scoundrel had spun on his heel and screamed at her that she was an ugly thing. That is the story Adrian is being told. Present-day Adrian slumps in shame and mutters that it sounds like the twisted courtship of a rotten scoundrel. Because there is no way anyone would look at Arwen and call her ugly. The proof of that walks into view a heartbeat later. Arwen stops before him with long, dark hair spilling loose across her armored shoulders. She greets him with a voice that carries every degree of the cold years between them. She says it has been a long time, Your Highness. She adds that he has not changed a bit. Adrian rubs the back of his neck and admits that actually he has changed a lot. He does not add the rest out loud, to the point where the person inside is completely different. He thinks it. And he thinks that this whole moment is his karma coming home to roost. An announcer calls out that Count Balorhard has arrived. Vale strides in, wrapped in his black cloak, and takes his place as observer. Arwen turns and formally introduces herself as the probation knight of the Iron Lion Knights, greeting Count Balorhard. Vale nods once and then leans in and murmurs a piece of unsolicited advice into her ear. He tells her to be careful because the prince's sword is quite vicious. A retainer immediately protests that the count has just sold off his neutrality as an observer. Vale barks a dry laugh before waving both duelists into position. He tells them both to take their positions. From now on, the duel shall begin. Arwen drops into a low stance with her blade held ready and dark hair falling forward across her face. Adrian smirks and tells her to show him the skill of the Iron Lion's prospect. She moves, fast. She is on him before the smirk fully leaves his face and his blue third eye flares just in time. He notes internally that, yes, this is quite decent movement. Then the pressure builds. Arwen's blade blurs and pushes him back step by step. Our boy feels his mana churning wrong inside his chest. The mana is starting to backflow, he realizes with a grunt of pain. She keeps coming. He chokes as another strike lands. He is being completely dragged around. This will not do, he decides. His chest ignites red. Dragon Slayer's heart has been activated. A crimson tide of aura roars out of him and shoves Arwen back several paces. The ghost of a dragon uncoils behind his shoulder. Her eyes widen. She breathes out, asking about that sword. Adrian steadies himself and wipes his mouth. He admits inside that not all single rings are the same. She is definitely on a different level from the other opponents. However, he has an answer for that too. He calls up the authority of judgment for limited use, and the golden window blooms in his sight. Arwen Kurgayan, female, 19, apprentice knight. Aptitude swordsmanship S+, and archery B+, and combat techniques A+, and mana sensitivity S+. Traits: sword prodigy, and competitive and peerless beauty, and strong on the outside, soft on the inside, and pure-hearted. The young man exhales in something almost like relief. The fact that he can see all of this with only limited authority means she is weaker than or of similar strength to him. He tightens his grip and charges again. Arwen shouts that the real fight starts now. The two of them fold into a blur of red and blue, with sparks scattering across the flagstones. When they finally break apart, both are heaving for air, with sword arms trembling and streaks of blood on their cheeks. The sun has dropped low behind the castle walls. Balorhard calls it. He tells them to stop, and that is it for today. They will continue the match tomorrow. Adrian clicks his tongue and complains that he was just about to finish it. Arwen wipes her mouth and says what a coincidence, because she was just about to do the same. Adrian grins and asks if that is so and if she wants to keep going. Arwen answers that if he wishes, then as much as he likes. Balorhard cuts them both off with a bark. Enough, it is already too late. Both of them need to go get treated immediately. Attendants swarm both duelists at once. A healer casts green healing light across Adrian's ribs and murmurs that there is a bruise here too. Across the yard, another healer works over Arwen in silence. Arwen says nothing at all. The two stare at each other for a moment. Then, they both turn around and walk away in opposite directions. Our boy thinks to himself that he absolutely won't lose. The days blur into each other. There is just no winner emerging. Onlookers gather in growing numbers at the practice ground. One of them asks if this is the third day. Another admits honestly that he is quite surprised. A blonde knight leaning on the fence remarks that he has heard plenty about Dame Arwen's skills, but the first prince's skills are equally impressive. He hopes they get a result today. The two duelists take their positions again in the red evening light. Adrian raises a hand before the first exchange. He says that before they go another round, he has something to say. Arwen's eyes go cold, a clear violet that seems to drink the sunset. She tells him not to say that he intends to try to apologize now. She will not accept an apology. Adrian shakes his head slowly. He says he sees. She intends to reclaim her wounded pride with her own power. That is an admirable thought, but well, it is not that. Since they are fighting this fiercely, he asks, should there not be a prize? The Cornim, he continues asking, how about the loser grants one wish for the winner? Internally, our boy already knows what he is angling for. If told to kneel, they kneel. If told to bow down and apologize, they do it. Arwen goes still. From behind the fence, Carl and other retainers panic at once. One of them shouts that, as a member of the royal family, His Highness must not say such things. They beg him to withdraw his statement. Adrian does not even look at them. He tells the outsiders to stay out of this and wonders silently why there are so many spectators here today. Then, softer back to her, he asks what she thinks. She lowers her sword a fraction. She says that although she is but a mere apprentice, she is also a member of the Knights, loyal to the Leonberg royal family. She could not dare commit such disrespect against His Highness. Adrian's smile flickers before she finishes the sentence. However, she adds that if it is within what His Highness permits, she supposes she may be entitled to receive the prize of the bet. Adrian's grin returns full force. He tells her good thinking. She raises her sword and warns him not to go back on his word later. Their blades ring together, and this time the fight is different. Arwen strikes first, but Adrian is not where he was yesterday. His Dragon Slayer's heart flares, and the dragon apparition uncoils across his back. His blade cuts through her defense before she can raise it. She thinks to herself that he was not this fast just yesterday. Was he hiding his true strength? Her block barely holds. Blood spatters her cheek. She chokes as another strike knocks her sideways. She scrambles back, panting with her sword arm shaking. Adrian keeps coming. The dragon roars silently behind him. The final exchange lands with a snap of sunset light on steel. Arwen's blade skitters across the stone. She drops to one knee with her chest heaving and stares up at him with disbelieving violet eyes. Adrian sheathes his sword and speaks quietly into the settling dust. He tells her he won the bet. Balorhard's expression tightens sharply from behind the fence. Arwen stares at the ground. She starts to speak but cannot finish. Adrian steps closer. He says her full name, Arwen Kurgayan. She raises her eyes and manages one syllable. Our boy's blue eyes lock onto hers with something that is not quite mercy and not quite cruelty. He tells her he wants her. The two words hang in the sunset air, and in that same moment, someone besides Arwen is quietly reeling from them. Carl stands off to the side and feels the mental picture he has been carefully building of the young prince crack straight down the middle. He remembers the day he first took the position of royal guard to the kingdom's notorious scoundrel first prince. Contrary to his worries, the job was not that difficult. He recalls stepping into the prince's chambers as a fresh recruit and being greeted with a lazy question asking if he was the new royal guard. Carl had bowed and answered yes, and that he looked forward to serving his highness. The prince did seem somewhat arrogant that day, but he never threw violent tantrums at the drop of a hat the way the rumors suggested. No, in fact, contrary to the rumors, the prince trained hard. Then even harder. Carl remembers standing in the rain with a wooden sword in his hands, watching Adrian swing again and again through the downpour. Carl had cried out for the prince to watch out, and then a burst of red aura had lit the whole courtyard as Adrian's blade came alive. Carl had watched from the corner of his eye and thought to himself that he had a feeling his highness would become a great man. That is what Carl used to think. One diun wiundasem. Now he stands in the sunset courtyard, hearing those two words hang in the air over a kneeling Arwen. He clutches his chest with a small stunned gasp. He thinks to himself how scandalous this is. Has he misjudged him this whole time? But before Carl can spiral all the way, Arwen finds her voice. She starts to ask if that is truly what his highness desires. Her expression sharpens into open fury. Our boy's face does not change. He answers evenly that of course it is. As she is, now she is merely an ordinary apprentice knight who cannot even defeat a scoundrel prince. So what he wants is not her. What he wants is the potential and the future of the knight named Arwen Kurgayan. Arwen's eyes widen as the meaning shifts under her feet. Adrian goes on. He needs a knight who follows him, not a knight who guards him through royal decree, yet a knight who belongs only to him. And from what he has seen, she has quite the talent for the sword. The golden status window still hovers at the edge of his sight with the sword prodigy trait glowing near the top. Therefore Arwen Kurgayan. He tells her to become his knight. Something moves across Arwen's face that no one in the courtyard fully catches. It goes deep. Ejirthanan. She thinks back to the day she first pulled on Iron Lion armor, the day she became the knight she had always dreamed of becoming, but no one had treated her as a knight. So she had worked twice as hard as everyone else. She had defeated every fellow apprentice member. She had trained until her sword arm sang, and still when the whispers rose in the halls, the same lines came back at her every time. They would say that Dame Arwen is their poster girl, that protecting a beautiful woman like Dame Arwen is an honor for a knight. She could not become a knight. She had only become an ornament they insisted on defending. Hadament Hor. And now the scoundrel first prince who once screamed at her that she was ugly is standing in front of her, saying he wants her potential and her future, not her face. She wonders if he is sincere. Hilas. She lifts her eyes to his and asks him to promise her one thing. Please treat her, she says, not as a woman, but as a knight. If he does that, she will do as his highness wishes. Adrian meets her look and answers without hesitation. Fine, he promises. She lowers her head and plants her sword point first into the flagstones and kneels. Hilas. She swears the oath in a clear, steady voice. She, Arwen, eldest daughter of the Kurgayan family, pledges her loyalty to Prince Adrian Leonberg and dedicates her sword and the rest of her life to his highness. Balerhard stands off to the side and watches the whole thing without a word. Adrian draws his own sword and raises it slowly. As a legitimate heir of Leonberg, he intones, and in the name of Adrian Leonberg, he dubs her a knight. The blade touches each of her shoulders in turn. Be brave, be courteous, and be loyal. Nobles cluster in stone hallways and hiss to each other that swearing loyalty to that scoundrel does not make any sense. They say an oath made on a bet must be nullified somehow. But he heard she refused all their help, one mutters. Another whispers asking if something smells fishy and if there could be some sort of secret relationship with the prince. Maybe he cannot openly take her as a mistress due to reputation, so he used a knight's oath as a cover. It was strange from the very start. Someone adds and asks why she would go to a suspicious duel hosted by that scoundrel in the first place. Somewhere in the first prince's palace, our boy is clutching his hair with both hands and shouting at the ceiling. This is crazy. Is he some kind of villain? He is just the worst scum on earth. He slumps against the wall in despair. Then quietly a voice. Carl stands in front of him with a strange, careful look on his face. He says it is about what his highness said that day. Adrian tilts his head. He asks when. Carl clarifies that it was a few days ago on the day of the final duel. Adrian answers that he remembers. Then sharper he asks if it upset Carl, because it is the truth. If a royal decree came right now telling Carl to go somewhere else, would he not go? If Carl wants, he can make the oath later too. Carl looks at the floor for a beat, then he asks quietly that if he said he would make the oath, would His Highness accept it? Adrian holds his eyes and answers plainly. No. He does not want him. There is no joy in raising him. Carl blinks. He says softly that he sees. The young man looks away and then back. He adds that he is not joking. He is serious. A scroll arrives that same afternoon and shifts the ground under our boy's feet again. The first prince of the Leonberg royal family, Adrian Leonberg, is hereby released from probation and ordered to attend the upcoming banquet hosted by the royal family. Adrian stares at it and mutters, asking if he did something. To think they would lift the probation a month and a half early, after acting like they would lock him inside the first prince's palace and never see him again. A brown-haired maid nearby remarks that she has no idea what that man is thinking. She asks if he is not happy his probation is over. Adrian shrugs and answers that he does not really care. Even if he leaves the palace, he has nowhere to go and no one to meet, since he does not know anyone. Hudamsti volta farao. The maid says suddenly. She apologizes and says she just saw an invitation that arrived for His Highness. Adrian repeats the word invitation. She says yes, and that it is this one. She hands him a card sealed with a red wax crest. He reads the front and frowns. A social club for special young lords. He asks what this is. The maid answers that it is a social gathering where His Highness used to be a member. Adrian says flatly that it was him. He asks if it is a weird place. Well, the maid stumbles. To a woman like her, the refined tastes of young lords are hard to comment on. The guy's mind fills in the picture on his own. The original Adrian slouched in a dim parlor, surrounded by wine and painted women. He mutters that it is incomprehensible. So it is a gathering for booze and chasing women. He tosses the card down and grumbles that he is busy enough with training. Why would he go to such a useless gathering? Harn. Then his eye catches the signature at the bottom. To the wise, brave, and thoughtful Prince Adrian, from your eternal friend Bernardo of the Eli family. Adrian goes very still. He repeats the name Eli to himself. It is a name he remembers. According to his uncle, they were the family that insisted on the mana heart until the very end, and eventually fell to ruin 100 years ago. Blue heart mana curls faintly at the edge of his own chest as the memory settles into place. He picks the invitation back up. He says he guesses he should attend after all. The maid bows and answers that she understands and will prepare his things. Adrian stands alone in the hall with the card in his hand. His blue eyes are fixed on Bernardo's signature. He hopes quietly that the family has not completely fallen from grace just yet. Between that quiet hope and the moment Adrian steps into the carriage, 4 months pass. Adrian's body has changed enormously in that time. In the fitting room of the first prince's palace, a bespectacled tailor kneels in front of him with hands clasped. He asks if the outfit is to his liking. He beams that he did not miss a single word of His Highness's instructions. The color is black, the embellishments are minimal, and the design is simple. Yet he adds proudly His Highness's dignity remains as majestic as ever. Adrian looks himself over in the fitted black royal jacket and admits that he certainly has lost a lot of weight. Carl chimes in that his measurements have decreased by more than half. The tailor grins and offers to start on the outfit for the palace banquet right away. Adrian shakes his head and tells him to wait a little longer. His measurements will change again by then. A few days after his probation is officially lifted, our boy is on his way to that blasted social club for special young lords. A gilded carriage rattles down the street between 2 rows of royal guards. Inside the carriage, Adrian yawns and slumps against the velvet. A prince truly is an exhausting position, he mutters. The clothes and the carriage and the guards, everything is just frustratingly stifling. Then his gaze catches on the young maid seated across from him and pauses. He asks slowly what that scar is. The maid touches the mark on her face and answers quietly that it is from her own incompetence. It was for something His Highness had every right to reprimand her for. Adrian's jaw tightens. Internally, he screams again. How is it that the more he digs into this body's past, the more horror stories he keeps finding? Then looking at her more carefully, he realizes he has seen this maid around the palace for months, yet he does not even know her name. He asks what her name is. She says softly and then bows her head. She is Adelia Bayern, Your Highness. Adrian's mind sharpens on the surname. Bayern, he repeats. It is a family that barely has its name listed on the noble registry anymore. To think he would hear that name again in a place like this. Because in the distant past, when not even cities existed, let alone kingdoms among the various races of the continent, it was an era where weak humans were naturally robbed and killed. Because in the distant past, when not even cities existed, let alone kingdoms among the various races of the continent, it was an era where weak humans were naturally robbed and killed. There were those who put an end to the history of that miserable species. At the end of the Great War to the saviors, who finally allowed humans to rise as the dominant species of the continent people, granted the epithet of the 5 electors. One of those 5 heroes was Gruhorn himself. Someone once asked our boy back when he was still a sword, whether he had ever thought about it. What he and Gruhorn would be doing after the war finally ended. The one who asked stood over the fallen king of giants Ida at the end of the long era of exploitation. That warrior was the iron-blooded sword Marquis Agnes Bayern, a red-haired woman in dark armor, who cleaved beastmen in half with swings that carried centuries of humanity's rage. And she cursed the fallen creatures with the foulest tongue anyone had ever heard. She spat slurs about everything she could think of. Even Gruhorn had once had to look the other way. Just thinking about the words she used dirties his ears now, which brings him back to the present. Adrian looks at the shy maid across from him with a fresh chill in his chest. A descendant of that Bayern. Just what happened to make them turn out like this? The carriage rolls to a stop. A guard announces that they have arrived at the destination. The young man steps down in his black royal outfit and tells Adelia that they will talk later. He passes through the gate of a lavish manor, humming with music and low voices. A silver-haired young man in a wine-red vest sweeps toward him with a smile too wide for his face and a glass already raised in greeting. He announces himself as Bernardo of the Eli family and greets Prince Adrian Leonberg. He tells His Highness he cannot express how happy he is to see him safe and sound. Internally, Bernardo is thinking something else entirely. He wonders if this guy is really a descendant of the Eli family because he just looks like a punk. Out loud, he offers a pitying line about how His Highness must have suffered greatly to become so thin. Adrian's mouth tugs into a small, cold smile. He lets out a quiet sound. Bernardo blinks. He asks if His Highness's body is still feeling unwell. Adrian shakes his head. It is nothing. He just thought it was good that he came. Thanks to Bernardo today will be very entertaining. Bernardo's own smile flickers uncertain. Inside the main hall, the party is already in full ugly bloom. Young lords sprawl among them, ogling and pawing. Girls in various states of undress are draped across velvet couches and wine is flowing without pause. One of them remarks about the fine skin of the girl next to him. His companion whines at him to stop teasing her. Adrian sits down with a glass in his hand and does not touch it. Across the hall, Bernardo sips his own wine and studies him carefully. He thinks this is strange. Normally this scoundrel would be dead drunk by now, flirting around everywhere. His aura feels different compared to before. Then Bernardo's grin sharpens at the corner. He says he heard that His Highness plucked the flower of the Iron Lion. The rumors are everywhere. Adrian says nothing. Bernardo presses forward, and his voice drops into something ugly and confidential. He confesses he was a step too late. He had his own eye on that woman for quite a while as well. If he knew this would happen, he should have gotten her oath first. She was beautiful enough just seeing her in armor, but he wonders how incredible she must look underneath. Adrian's expression does not change. He asks softly if Bernardo has any siblings at home. Bernardo stares and then laughs. He asks if His Highness has forgotten already. He has a younger brother. Adrian nods slowly. He says that is a relief. Bernardo's smile freezes. He starts to ask what Adrian means. A dark aura blooms off Adrian's back, and the next instant Bernardo is airborne, with blood spraying from his mouth. The hall erupts into chaos. Bottles shatter across the marble. Girls scream. Another young lord stares with his wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. The guy steps forward through the mess. He tells the coughing man on the floor that it is a relief the family line will not end. Then the beating begins in earnest. Fists and boots land in relentless rhythm across Bernardo's ribs. Chairs splinter under the impact. Wine spills over the marble. When it is finally over, Bernardo lies broken and gasping on the floor. Our boy stands over him with dark aura still curling off his shoulders. From now on, Adrian tells him quietly his younger brother is the heir. The verdict hangs in the wine-soaked air for one heartbeat. Then Adrian keeps beating him. Fist after fist lands on Bernardo's face as the shattered young lord tries to crawl backward across the marble. Blood soaks the carpet. The other guests stare in frozen terror. Two young lords hold their wine glasses halfway to their mouths. A blonde girl clutches a blue-haired boy's sleeve. A silver-haired attendant presses against the wall with both hands over her mouth. Someone finally finds the courage to shout. They ask why on earth His Highness is doing this. Adrian does not stop. He lets a final punch land and stands over the whimpering Bernardo, breathing evenly. He tells the room to listen well. He can tolerate them thinking of him as a scoundrel, but he cannot tolerate them treating him like one. The other lords stare at each other in confusion. They whisper among themselves, asking what he is talking about. Adrian's answer is another punch. It means he says, as his knuckles crack across Bernardo's mouth, that they need to get hit some more. Bernardo's cry is a wet gargle. When our boy finally straightens, he turns to the silver-haired attendant pressed against the wall. He calls out the name Eli. She jerks upright. She stammers out a yes, Your Highness. He asks if he did not tell her earlier that today would be very entertaining. She thinks something rude and terrified all at once, but manages a shaking bow. Adrian orders her to go and summon the royal knights. She stammers her acknowledgement and bolts from the room. Then Adrian turns to the frozen women scattered across the couches. He tells them to leave. They look at each other confused. Some of the young lords beside them begin edging toward the door too. Adrian's expression cools. He says softly that he believes he said women. If they want to leave, they may leave, but if they do, they will be leaving as women. One of the young lords screams a high, thin sound and freezes in place. The others catch on and go pale. The young man steps into the middle of the hall. None of them even formally knelt before a prince, he tells the room. Nor did they show any respect. They mocked him to his face. And they insulted his knight. He turns to the purple-haired officer beside him, who has just arrived with the royal knights. He asks what charges can be applied in this case. The officer answers precisely. Since they look down on royalty, that constitutes insult to royalty. And on top of that, since they challenged the authority of the royal family, this is tantamount to treason. A gray-armored knight steps forward and asks for the order. He wants to know who they shall force to their knees. Adrian smiles small. All of them, he says. Everyone. Later in the throne hall, our boy stands before his father, with his hands clasped behind his back, and receives the lecture he expected. The king's face is dark under his crown. He tells his son that he has caused quite a stir the moment his probation was lifted. 14 noble children have been arrested. Insult to royalty, treason. He tacked on every grand excuse he could find. He asks if Adrian realizes what he has done. Adrian answers with a bored sound. The king goes on and says that since he invoked the authority of the royal family, they must be punished severely. But with 14 families involved, the crown cannot simply ignore the backlash. Adrian asks if his father is worried about the backlash. They are outcasts even within their own families, he explains coolly. They are irredeemable trash that only tarnish their families' reputations by keeping them around. He tells his father to send a letter. The king repeats the word letter. He asks to whom. Adrian tilts his head and says the king keeps asking questions he already knows the answers to. Are there not people who can handle the internal noise of each family better than anyone else, the brothers and sisters of those arrested scoundrels? Is he wrong? The king stares at him for a long moment and then exhales heavily. He tells him to leave now. Adrian sweeps out with a cheerful acknowledgement, thinking to himself as he goes that his father had nothing to say back. Back in the first prince's palace, our boy summons Adelia Byrne to a private room. Now he tells her gently she does not need to be so nervous. He is not going to hurt her. The young maid stands with red-orange hair, tied up in a neat bun, and small hands clenched together at her chest. Her green eyes glisten with worry. She asks in a shaking voice what exactly this lowly girl did wrong. Adrian sighs and looks at her for a long silent moment. That scoundrel Adrian must have tormented her quite a bit. Then he considers her family more carefully. The Byrne name barely stayed on the list of nobles at all. Even direct descendants no longer know about the Byrne of old. The history of glory was erased. Their peerless arts were cut off. Their great prestige and lofty pride have all vanished without a trace. And yet, Adrian's authority of judgment blooms in the corner of his sight, and one look at Adelia's status window stops him in his tracks. Aptitude swordsmanship S rank, mana sensitivity S+, and then the traits. Wait, hold on. What is up with these traits? The window unfolds them one by one. Butcher, which means she goes crazy when seeing blood. War maniac, which means a mad woman obsessed with battle. And at the same time, fragile heart, meaning tender-hearted. Caregiver, meaning skilled at taking care of others. Slave mentality, meaning a dependent and passive personality. The guy claps a hand to his own head. She possesses unrivaled talent, and yet she does not have a single trait to control her own madness. Is it really okay for him to unleash that madness upon the world? He stands still for a long beat with Adelia still trembling behind him. Then he decides. He has to try. It is an S-rank talent after all. And as he reads the trait list again, one of them catches his eye. Slave mentality, a trait where one feels great joy in the existence of a master they serve with their heart. So, he says her full name, Adelia Byron. He tells her to swear her loyalty to him. She looks up startled. She asks what he means by that. Adrian answers plainly. He is telling her to become his knight. Swear it right here, right now. Adelia's face goes pale, and her voice cracks. She says that is not something this humble girl can handle. Adrian shakes his head slowly. She said her family was insignificant. He will take responsibility for her family. In return, she must swear loyalty to him and serve him as her master. If she cannot control the madness herself, he will hold the reins for her. Adelia's clasped hands tighten. She asks in a small voice if he will really take responsibility for her family. Yes, Adrian answers. If she wishes, he will summon them to the capital so she can see them any time. Her eyes fill with tears. She swallows once. She says she will do as he says. She sinks to her knees on the polished floor and bows her head over her folded hands. Adelia, eldest daughter of the Bayern family, she says softly swears loyalty to His Highness Prince Adrian Leonberg. She will serve him as her master and devote herself to him for her entire life. Adrian lays one hand lightly on the crown of her head. He says good. From now on she will obey his orders unconditionally. Adelia answers steady and quiet, as he commands. Her green eyes lift once to meet his blue ones, wet with something that is not quite fear anymore. Adrian turns and walks toward the door with his hand in his pocket. His blue gaze is fixed on nothing in particular. Was this the right choice, he wonders. Adrian does not get much time to sit with his doubt. Within days, the whole kingdom is talking about what he has just done. The rumors spread fast and ugly. Someone whispers that the first prince who had been quiet lately has started acting like a scoundrel again. Not only did he force a knight's oath of loyalty using underhanded methods, he also summoned noble children and beat them and even threw them into prison. And now they say he is making a maid who has never even held a sword into a personal knight. Somewhere in a dim room, a shadowed figure with a pipe listens to the whispers with satisfaction, and in another hall entirely, Prince Gilliam leans back in his chair with a nasty smile. The third prince announces that it is obvious his brother is trying to build a harem under the guise of personal knights. That is truly just like him. Adrian slumps on his throne with a hand pressed to his forehead and mutters that since when was everyone so interested in him? He only took in one personal knight, yet from the moment he woke up, everyone has something to say. Why do rumors travel so fast? The king is the first to come at him. Adrian's father storms into the audience hall, clutching his crown at the temples. He complains that he is getting a headache trying to clean up the mess his son has made. And on top of that, he is indulging in women. Pathetic. He asks if Adrian has given up on the bet entirely. Before Adrian can even open his mouth, an attendant announces that the queen has arrived as well. Our boy groans internally. She sweeps in on the king's heels. She says that just when it seemed he had turned over a new leaf, it seems he intends to return to his old ways. Then her whole expression brightens and Adrian's stomach drops before she has finished her next line. Actually, she declares this works out well. Once a spouse is chosen and he settles down, he will surely stop this wandering. She tells him to trust his mother, because this time she will definitely find him a suitable spouse. Adrian stares at the floor for a long moment after his parents leave. He does not even know anymore, he thinks, but there is work to do. Back in his private chambers, Adelia sits perched on the edge of a couch, with her hands folded in her lap and green eyes wide and cautious. She asks if she will also gain mana now. Yes, Adrian answers. a very special kind of mana. He raises one hand and blue heart mana glows around his fingers. Though the world has completely forgotten the sword marquee, he thinks he has not forgotten a single thing. Not the footsteps she left behind, not the sword that danced at her fingertips, and not the magnificent beating of her heart itself. A golden echo of Agnes Bayern rises for a heartbeat in the space between them. Adelia's chest lights up gold in answer, and her eyes fill with startled tears as something ancient stirs alive inside her. A status window blooms in Adrian's vision. Adelia Bayern has sensed mana. Mana has been successfully imprinted onto Adelia Bayern. Mana has successfully settled within the body. A mana heart has been created. Adelia touches her sternum with trembling fingers. She breathes out that this is mana. Adrian steadies himself against the arm of a chair. What she just performed, he tells her, is the method for forging a mana heart. From now on, she should practice it on her own whenever she has time. Then his knees nearly give out and Adelia panics at his side. She asks if he is all right. He mutters that, to think he would end up like this just from creating one measly mana heart. He is just a bit tired. She asks why he would go so far for someone as lowly as her. He tells her it is fine and to just leave now. She stands and hesitates and then turns back. He looks up and asks why she is looking at him like that. Her clasped hands press to her chest. She promises she will serve him with loyalty for the rest of her life. The young man sighs. He tells her just not to forget that he is her master. She nods eagerly. He tells her quietly that he is afraid she might forget. Truly, she answers. Truly. Mithi. A few days later, Carl comes with a report. Regarding Bernardo Eli, he says the man is being held by the Royal Guard as a witness to the recent disturbance. It seems no one is allowed to see him until the trial begins. In a barred cell somewhere across the city, the silver-haired lord grins through his bruises. Adrian repeats the word trial. He asks if he has to attend this trial as well. Carl assures him that royalty does not stand trial. Our boy answers cheerfully that this is good news. Then he mutters that they are really blowing this out of proportion. He turns to Adelia, who is still hovering nearby with a folded cloth in her hands. He asks how things are with her mana heart and if it has not stabilized by now. She answers softly that yes, it has. Good, he says. From today on, she will join him in his training. She should go change her clothes and meet him at the training grounds, and he adds that she should put down that rag. She is a knight now. Mithi. Out in the training courtyard, the sun is high when Vale Balorhard sweeps through the archway with his sword already drawn. He demands to know what Adrian thinks he is doing. Adrian shrugs and says he is warming up. Balorhard snaps that he does not mean him. He means that girl. Across the yard, Adelia is running laps in a fitted night tunic with red hair pulled back in a bouncing ponytail. Adrian tells his uncle that he heard the rumors right. He is making her a knight. Mithi. Balorhard's face darkens. He asks if the title of a knight is so trivial to him. Considering the current situation, how can he be so reckless? Adrian's patience snaps. He asks since when his uncle became such a busybody. If he hates it so much, why does he keep coming here? Balorhard grits out his title through his teeth. Adelia arrives at their feet gasping. 10 laps complete. She bows quickly and apologizes for making His Highness argue on her behalf. Adrian tells her to forget it and hands her a training sword. Today he says he will teach her just the basic stance. First, take her stance and swing like this. Adrian shows her once and tells her to give it a try. Adelia lifts the sword and asks in a small voice if she should swing like that. Her green eyes narrow into focus. She swings. Adrian is knocked backward. Balorhard's mouth falls open. Sweat beads at Adrian's temple. She copied it that well after seeing it just once, he thinks. Adelia looks up innocently and asks if her stance was correct. In our boy's mind, an alarm clangs. Wait a minute. If he lets his guard down, she will surpass him in no time. The slave mentality trait, he remembers, means submission to the strong, not respect towards the weak. And given how the scoundrel prince tormented her in the past, he is already uneasy. If she surpasses him now, things could go very wrong. Balorhard hums from the side. He says that to think she possesses such talent. He steps in close to Adelia, with his fingers pressed to his chin, examining her the way a swordmaster examines a rare blade. The guy's head snaps around. He asks what his uncle thinks he is doing. He warns Balorhard not to dare covet her. Balorhard's brow arches. He asks what Adrian could possibly offer that child. He is just a novice who has only held a sword for a few months. Blue chain mana coils to life around Balorhard's shoulders, and his blade lifts. He says Adrian cannot handle her. Adrian steadies his own sword. His breath comes out slow. If it were the scoundrel he answers, that pig would have trembled and backed down immediately. But he is not him, and if he cannot handle her. Blue heart mana flares at his chest, and the ghost of a golden sword rises behind him. A status line drifts across his vision. A portion of the soul manifests in response to the user's will. Adrian's eyes deepen to the color of old blood. If he cannot handle her, then no one can. For he has drunk the blood of the giant king and the mad dragon and countless other beings. Red aura pours off his shoulders. Balorhard stops mid-step. The whole courtyard darkens around them. Our boy meets his uncle's eyes, with one eye now glowing red and the other still coldly blue. She is his. The declaration hangs in the darkened courtyard for one long beat. Then Adrian keeps speaking. He warns his uncle not to look at her, and not to covet her. His voice drops to something quieter and colder. He truly hates it, he adds, when someone takes what is his. Vale Balorhard stands frozen at the edge of the training ring, with his sword still half lifted. Neither one moves for a long silent moment. Then, somewhere behind Adrian's eyes, the world tilts. The courtyard falls away. Blue water swallows him, or something that feels like water. His sense of reality is fading. He cannot feel vitality or life anywhere. He is filled only with a sensation of cold and darkness. Is this an omen, he wonders? At this rate, this weak body will be consumed by the soul of Gruhorn. Dark tendrils curl around his shoulders and pull him further down. The original blade of Gruhorn hangs above him in the void, with the sword tip pointing at his throat. Then a voice speaks in his own head. That is enough. The blue tide reverses. Something inside him pulls back. The soul retreats. Adrian's right eye fades from red to blue. When the world snaps into focus again, he is standing on the flagstones with his hand outstretched and blue heart mana still curling off his fingers. Balorhard does not miss the opening. He speaks slowly and carefully, as if to a boy still teetering on a ledge. A single ordinary night, he tells our boy, can save the lives of 10 soldiers. A single outstanding night can save the lives of 100 soldiers. That child, he glances at Adelia, might be able to save 1,000 or even more soldiers. Adrian asks flatly if this is conviction. Balorhard nods. This is for the commander of the northern frontier's great cause. Adrian repeats the words, great cause. However, he turns away. He does not care. Even if she could save countless people, Balorhard presses, but still Adrian keeps walking. Then Adelia's voice cuts across the yard. She steps forward with her sword lowered and her chin lifted. She tells the quad-chain knight quietly that her body and heart already belong to his highness. She cannot follow his words count. Balorhard stares at her. Adrian smiles small. It was worth the effort of dragging his own soul out, he thinks. Slave mentality is bound to submit to a being of higher rank. That is what she is saying in her own way. He turns to his uncle, and he adds, does his uncle not have nothing left to teach him now? The goal from the start was just to help him lose weight. If Balorhard wishes to keep visiting his palace, he must not interfere with Adrian's affairs from now on. Balorhard exhales through his teeth. Understood. Even after that day, our boy notes, with quiet satisfaction, that his uncle continues to visit the palace without fail to watch over Adelia. And even though he cannot do anything now, that nagging and interference have been forbidden, Adrian finds it quite entertaining to watch his arrogant uncle squirm. Then one afternoon, Adelia's blade rings against the training pole with a golden hum. Both Balorhard and Adrian snap their heads toward her. She blinks at her own sword. Adrian's eyes widen. That is sword resonance already. He recovers fast enough to clap and call out good and good job. Internally he sweats. To be this fast he might actually get overtaken. Vedi snam. Balorhard's face has gone stone cold. He asks if Adrian taught her the mana heart as well. Adrian answers yeah, and asks if something is wrong. His uncle's fury detonates. He asks if it was not enough for Adrian alone to learn such a cheap trick. He tells him to get out. There was a much better path. There was potential Adrian could not even imagine. And Adrian ruined it all. The young man turns to Karl standing at the wall and orders him to escort the count out. Balorhard raises a hand and says to forget it. He will leave on his own 2 feet. Our boy watches him go with something small twisting under his ribs. Is what he learned a cheap trick, he asks himself. No, absolutely not. Then Carl asks softly from the side why the Count speaks like that. Because he does not know, Adrian answers. The people of this era have completely forgotten what a real mana heart is like. If they had not forgotten, they would not have discarded it. Ballerhard's silhouette shrinks into the sunset. Adrian promises the empty air that the Count will find out soon enough. The true power of the mana heart. Days later, sooner than expected, Ballerhard is back at the training grounds. He looks up at Adrian standing at the top of the steps, and his eyes are hard. Adrian remarks that his uncle acted like he would never come back. Ballerhard tells him to prove it. He will use only a single ring. If Adrian can push him back even half a step, he will acknowledge him. The guy arches a brow and asks what the bet was back then. Granting a wish, Ballerhard nods. If Adrian wins, the Count will grant him one thing, whatever it may be. If Adrian asks him to pass down the family's secret technique, he will do so. Adrian shakes his head. That is not what he wants. Well, fine. For now. Their swords clash before Adrian even finishes the sentence. Ballerhard tells him to fight, and his first swing aims straight for Adrian's neck. Adrian tilts backward and thinks that his uncle is still as venomous of a sword as ever. Steel rings on steel. Adrian ducks the second swing and spins under the third, and absorbs the fourth on his own blade with a jolt that runs up his arm. He rolls across the flagstones and comes up on one knee. Ballerhard asks coldly if this is all. He asks if Adrian has given up already. Adrian mutters as if. He is detestable, our boy admits internally, but he must say what needs to be admitted. Uncle is strong. Such an uncle is waiting for him to draw out his mana to give him a taste of an even more miserable defeat. With a mana heart of just this level, it is certain he would lose as the Count intends. Then Adrian smiles. He asks if it is not strange. 400 years ago, countless mana heart knights achieved unbelievable feats. Yet just because one somewhat useful technique appeared, all the arts of those great knights are now treated as trash. That is what everyone seems to think. That the technique called mana chain is a much more powerful method of mana manipulation than the mana heart. Ballerhard's brow furrows. He asks what exactly Adrian is trying to say. His thoughts are different, Adrian answers. It was not the mana heart that was weak, but its masters. Just because it is a mana heart does not mean they are all the same. He tilts his head. Uncle? Has his uncle perhaps heard of the martial spirit hymn? Ballerhard's expression twists. He snaps that this is a place to cross swords, not a place to discuss such ear-tickling things. Mulin? Adrian's smile widens. He thought his uncle would say that, since he also called the mana heart a crude technique learned only by lowly mercenaries. Ballerhard bites back that Adrian talks too much. He asks if he needs more time to catch his breath. No, Adrian answers. Mulin? The path a knight has walked, he says, quietly becomes an achievement. 100 victories are his pride and his power. Ballerhard stares. He asks what Adrian means. A golden line unfolds across Adrian's vision. Using one of 100 victories won against apprentice trainees dreaming of becoming knights. The achievement is engraved in the heart, and the engraved achievement becomes a martial spirit hymn. Martial spirit hymn has been created, dwelling within the knight's sword. Common rank martial spirit hymn called Hymn of Sparring has been created. Vias, an ordinary small achievement Adrian says that he has done over the past half year. The effect of Hymn of Sparring has been activated. Blue radiance floods down the length of his blade. His eyes sharpen. This, he tells his uncle across the sunlit yard. This is the true power of the mana heart. Martial spirit hymn. Blue radiance floods the length of the blade as the Hymn of Sparring takes effect, and our boy launches back at his uncle with everything he has learned pouring into a single strike. Vale Ballerhard barely lifts his sword to meet him. Between blows, the Count tells Adrian flatly that no matter what he does, the result will be the same. As long as he possesses a mana heart, he cannot defeat a mana chain. He charges straight ahead, meeting his opponent head-on as their swords crash into each other. The mana of the rings has the property of causing backflow through the heart itself. Adrian's teeth clench as he feels that truth carved through his chest with every impact. Even so, our boy refuses to break. Ballerhard remarks with grudging interest that Adrian is quite good at stubbornly enduring. Adrian's eyes narrow because that is exactly the point. In his head he tells himself why. To obtain this hymn he sparred more than 100 times and withstood the mana of the rings more than 1,000. It is a power forged specifically to deal with Knights of the Ring. While clashing 100 times he endured 1,000 waves. This is the power of the hymn of sparring. His grip tightens, and he charges again, murmuring to himself that now it finally seems worth a try. Their blades meet in a bright, violent flash, and, for the first time in the fight, Balorhard is the one being pressed. The Count's brow furrows. He mutters half to himself that he never expected the boy to last this long. Adrian rises through the impact with his sword ringing, and a small confident smile tugging at his mouth. After the clash, he jumps back and takes a moment to catch his breath. He asks his uncle how this is possible, and then answers his own question. Did he not already say it? Not all mana hearts are the same. Balorhard's face darkens. He says the boy is arrogant, and then he stops playing. The Count leaps in from above, with his cloak snapping, and the follow-up blow crashes into Adrian so hard the young prince chokes on the shock of it. Balorhard tells him coolly that just enduring until this point is already commendable, so he will praise him. But, as expected, a common-grade martial spirit hymn is not enough. His voice softens into something almost distant. 400 years ago, he says, the knights of that age made a grave mistake. They did not leave any enemies for their descendants. At first, surely everything was passed down intact. The sword techniques and the correct method of refining the heart and the shining martial spirit hymns. But time gnawed at those achievements. Tales of dragons no one had ever seen, and giant kings no one had ever heard of, were bound to become absurd legends. Of course, new hymns were created, but only ever a victory against 10 knights, or an achievement of overcoming 100 soldiers. At best, hymns built against humans alone. Nothing that could rise to myth or hero rank. Nothing that could withstand the new wind. The young man coughs with blood on his mouth, and mumbles the words mana chain back at him. Balorhard's rage snaps out sharp. He says that with such paltry techniques, one cannot reach transcendence. Our boy blinks up at him with genuine confusion and mutters that his uncle must have been drinking during the day because he cannot understand a single word the man has been saying for a while now. The Count's eyes go red. He tells Adrian and every arrogant, foolish knight like him that they need to know just how great a thing they have lost, and if they do not know, then he will teach them. He raises his wooden training sword, and a monstrous red aura twists around the blade. He speaks it out slow and deliberate. That which no treasured sword can cut. That which splits a dragon's scales. That which drinks its hot blood. And then he declares that he sings the hymn of true dragon slaying. The world lights up red. Warnings scream inside Adrian's chest that his current abilities cannot handle the grade of the hymn. One after another, the system tells him a part of the hymn is omitted again and again. Balorhard is only able to sing a single verse of it, and even that is more than the young prince can bear. The strike lands with the name splitting the dragon's scales. Adrian's eyes fly wide as he realizes that at this rate he is going to be devoured whole. An explosion of blue and red swallows him. When it clears, our boy is on his back gasping, while a distant voice cries out for his highness. Balorhard walks toward him with a green mana chain, still uncoiling from his fingers, and his sword resting easy on his shoulder. His tone is almost tired now. He murmurs that he did say he would use only one ring, and yet after using all 4 rings he possesses, Adrian still failed to prevent his sword from being severed. He glances down at the shattered blade at the young prince's feet and states it plain. The mana from the heart is inferior to the mana from the ring. That is an undeniable truth. All there. Adrian sits crumpled in the dust, with one hand braced against the ground, and blood streaked down his temple. His breath is ragged, his eyes lift, and a slow, tired smile pulls at his bloody mouth. Softly and almost casually, he speaks his uncle's full title into the quiet. Count Vale Balorhard. The older man freezes mid-step and turns. Our boy finishes the sentence. He tells the Count that he lost. A monstrous dragon of shadow and blood rears up in the dark with jaws wide. Our boy grips a bleeding sword against its throat while pleading with it. No, stop, please stop now. The blue jewel in the hilt flickers weakly as he holds on with eyes shining desperate. Then the vision finally splinters and he collapses back into his own body soaked in cold sweat. Adrian wakes on tangled sheets with one hand curled against the fabric and breath ragged. He mutters under his breath at the damn martial spirit hymn. This is the price for forcefully drawing out the power of it, he tells himself. The hymn of true dragon slaying is a martial spirit hymn concerning a myth, and forcing a wisp of it through his current body was always going to come at a cost. His body became a wreck because of it, but even lying here half broken, he decides that it was well worth the risk, because something else happened while he was unconscious. He closes his eyes and lets his own hymn rise up in him instead, the very first martial spirit hymn he wove for himself. 100 victories are his pride and his strength. During 100 duels, he endured 1,000 waves. He tells himself that now he shall stand tall before even greater waves. Blue radiance pours around him in the memory, and a soft golden window blooms in his vision to confirm what he already feels. The grade of the hymn of sparring has risen slightly. He smiles thin and satisfied. This should be enough for the sparring with that third prince bastard. The door bursts open. Carl calls out for his highness, and behind him Adelia rushes in with tears already spilling. She cries that he has finally regained consciousness and that it was total chaos after he collapsed. She says she has never seen the queen so furious in her entire life. Our boy's smirk widens as he shifts against the pillow. He tells her that serves them right. Adelia adds that Count Balorhard also left a message asking to be notified the moment his highness awakens. Adrian waves that off immediately. He tells her not to report anything yet because he is going to rest for a while. Alone again, he lets his eyes close and reminds himself of the real danger. If he does not properly recover the spirit that was damaged by the excessive use of the hymn, he will pay a terrible price. Reality and memories of the past will mix into a chaotic mess, and at some point the boundary of reality will completely collapse. Eventually, he would become a madman, endlessly reenacting fragments of his martial spirit within a severed world. He grimaces. To think that he would be trapped in the sword's memories again right after finally becoming human. Just imagining it makes him shudder. So he turns his mind to something more useful, Agnes Bayern. He tells Adelia across the small breakfast table that Agnes was a great swordswoman. Since Adelia is a descendant of that Bayern line, she should be able to inherit the martial spirit hymn Agnes left behind. Adelia stares down at her hands, stunned. She murmurs that to think her ancestor was such a great swordswoman. The young man pours himself a drink and warns her that of course she will need to grow far beyond what she is now to possess the grade befitting that hymn. So he asks casually, what does she want to do by learning the sword? Adelia's throat works. She stammers that if she could truly become a knight, and then if she becomes a knight then. She trails off, unable to finish the thought. Adrian watches her for a long quiet moment, and then tells her that if she cannot think of it now, she can tell him later. She sets a plate in front of him and freezes. Then she drops to her knees at his side. Her voice trembles as she speaks his title. She tells him she will become His Highness's sword. Zord. Adrian's eyes widen. An old lesson stirs in his memory. Some hymns of martial deeds begin with the sound of a charging trumpet. Some begin from the first step across a plain. And some have their stories begin with a heartfelt oath. Golden fire ripples out of Adelia as she promises to live for His Highness for the entirety of her life and to dedicate her everything to him. A radiant window unfurls above her. Adelia Bayern dedicates the hymn of subordination. Adrian barely has time to wonder aloud if this is her martial spirit hymn before another realization arrives. Sometimes a martial spirit hymn influences others as well. Zum. A second window ignites in front of him. A second window ignites in front of him. A new martial spirit hymn has been created. A normal grade martial spirit hymn called the Hymn of Domination has been forged in return. Our boy lets out a low, delighted sound. Internally, he lays it out clean. The Hymn of Subordination is a hymn dedicated to a master and less a martial hymn than a soul-binding oath of submission. Even with her slave mentality trait, to think a descendant of the Sword Marquis would wear a hymn of subordination. He honestly did not see it coming, but he is not about to refuse unexpected help. As long as he is the target of the hymn of subordination, Adelia's growth will work directly to his own benefit. Zord. He tells her a quiet thank you. Adelia lifts her head with breath catching and eyes shining as she whispers his title back at him. He adds under his breath that he does not yet know in what direction that benefit will come, but he can afford to be patient. Zord. A few days pass. In the palace, he sits again with the queen. She reaches out and asks if Ian's body is feeling any better, using the old childhood nickname without thinking. He tells her stiffly that it is fine. Inside, he sighs. It is easier to deal with those who hate this body, he thinks. Someone who cherished the original owner of this body the way his mother does is quite awkward to handle. She studies him for a moment and then asks softer if he perhaps resents his uncle. She insists that his uncle did not truly mean to harm him, and that even if some bad feelings are left, he should shake them off now. Adrian answers that he does not have any bad feelings. The queen bursts into tears immediately and cries that this must be a lie. His uncle treated his youth so roughly and nagged him at every turn, and there is no way none of that has been left behind. Adrian repeats patient that no, he really does not, because in the back of his mind he already knows what Balarhard actually did. The Count's own voice returns to him from that day low and calm behind red aura and a wooden training sword. Balarhard had told himself that he had already landed a blow on the boy that day. Since all of the boy's pride and truths were denied at once, it would be hard for him to endure what had been planted in him. An inner demon. If Adrian has the ability, he will leap further because of it. If he cannot overcome it, he will lose even that precious martial prowess of his. And honestly, Balarhard had murmured he did not care much what happened after that. And the queen dabs at her eyes and speaks gently again. His uncle has spent his whole life closer to the sword than to people, so he has a clumsy and rough side to him. Still recently it seemed that man was quite proud of him. He even went so far as to persuade His Majesty in person. It is thanks to that uncle that Adrian's probation was lifted earlier than scheduled. Nah, the guy sits very still. She goes on. Trouble arose the moment the probation was lifted, and his uncle's position at court must have been quite difficult as well. She asks softly if that is why he acted so disapproving all this time. Later in his own quiet room, our boy sits on the edge of the bed with his hands folded, staring at nothing. His brow slowly draws together. A single question hangs in the still air. Why, he asks himself, would that man do that for him? An old man with a snow-white beard and a red velvet cap and gold-trimmed formal robes bows respectfully in the reception hall. This is Niccolo Marciadel, an elderly court scholar summoned to tutor the first prince. He greets Adrian with a polite greeting, and our boy, with arms folded and expression already flat, informs him that he absolutely refuses. Adrian groans about why he has to study at all. His argument comes fast. If one does not learn what difference is there between a human and a beast. The scholar's eyes widen, and he sputters offended, asking if the prince is calling him a beast right now. He recovers just as quickly and points out that His Highness has only just begun his studies, so he cannot possibly be called a beast just yet. Adrian is not falling for the trick. He tells Niccolo not to play word games with him and insists that despite how he looks, he already knows everything he needs to know. There is no reason for him to learn anything more. The old scholar strokes his beard and considers and then smiles. If His Highness insists, then let them do this. They will discuss a few topics together, and if Adrian's skills are truly as he claims, Niccolo will never visit him again. Our boy grins. That sounds good. The scholar pulls out a book and slides it in front of him. He says Adrian will find it interesting. The text evaluates the relationship between ruler and subject as a kind of contract and a transaction. The ruler receives military and economic support in exchange for protecting the subject. The subject seeks the ruler's protection and political stability in return for their loyalty. Adrian leans in. He admits the old man is actually making some sense. All relationships are supposed to be about give and take. He starts pointing at passages and asking about this part, and also here. Niccolo nods along, and by the time either of them look up, the windows are burning orange with sunset. The scholar closes the book and rises with a courtly little bow. He tells Adrian they should continue the rest of the discussion tomorrow. Adrian, still hunched over his notes, mumbles that, sure, he will be waiting. Then the door clicks shut. A long silence. Adrian's face slowly falls. Wait a minute, he just ended up taking a normal lesson. He drags a hand down his face. That old man is really sly. Down the corridor, Niccolo strolls back with a small, satisfied smile and murmurs to himself that the first prince is quite different from what the rumors suggest. Later, our boy sprawls on his back with the sky in his eyes and admits out loud that he is bored. He wonders if he has been living too diligently lately. Since he is not training, there is simply nothing to do, and it has been quite a while since he acted like a proper prince. A servant knocks and reports that Sir Vale Balarhard is here to see him. What shall they do? Adrian tells them to send him in. Standing, he thinks that it has been a few days since the last duel, so it was about time the man visited. The Count enters. His face is drawn and his eyes shadowed. Nothing like the razor-sharp swordmaster who split Adrian's blade. He looks like a man carrying something he cannot put down. In Adrian's head, an amused note lands. It seems his uncle has not overcome the inner demon he planted at all. Balorhard stops in front of him. Silence. Then he lowers his head and speaks softly. He says he is sorry. He broke the promise he made himself and caused Adrian great injury because of it. He has absolutely no excuses. The young man blinks. Internally he winces. The real reason he had to convalesce so long was not because of his uncle's aura blade. It was because he overused the hymn of true dragon slaying. His uncle's position at court must have been quite difficult on top of that worrying that he had caused yet another incident with the prince. Balorhard lifts his head. He tells Adrian to tell him what he desires. If Adrian asks for his arm, he will give it. If he asks for his eye, he will give it too. Adrian frowns. He asks what he is supposed to do with junk like that. Inside our boy softens by a hair. He mutters to himself that for a man who would have been a sword master in the old days, getting caught up in his inner demons is rough. He waves a hand grandly. Fine, he will be generous. He will state his wish first. Uncle, he says, let him go on an outing. Balorhard's brow furrows. He points out that since Adrian's probation has ended, he can go out any time he wishes. Adrian shakes his head. Not a one-day trip. Somewhere far, if possible, outside the capital. Balorhard considers this in silence, and then answers that it will take some time to arrange the schedule. With the upcoming banquet going too far, will be impossible. Adrian says that is fine. Good, the Count replies. He will contact him once the schedule is set. Adrian tells him to do so. Balorhard turns to leave, and then pauses. He glances back over his shoulder at his nephew, and his face softens by the barest fraction. Adrian catches the look and immediately snaps at him. He asks what and why he is staring like that. Well, the Count says, it is just a bit unexpected. He thought Adrian would demand something much more unreasonable. The guy pretends to shrug it off, since the Count broke his promise, and it is a rare opportunity to take advantage of in many ways. Then his tone drops a fraction honest and quiet. It is just that seeing that stubborn old man acting like that made him feel bad for him. Balorhard's eyes widen a hair. He does not answer. The door opens on Carl, who is smiling too obviously for Adrian's taste. Adrian rounds on him instantly. He asks what and why Carl is laughing. He says Carl is looking a little too comfortable these days. Carl only bows lower and reports calmly that the letter His Highness has been waiting for has arrived. I named Lavdi. Adrian's eyes sharpen. The envelope bears a red wax seal. He opens it and reads. The sender writes that she has recently achieved a small accomplishment, and it seems she will be able to visit him soon. She hopes he remains in good health until that day. The signature at the bottom reads, Arwen Kurgayan. A tall figure of the dark-haired swordswoman rises in his mind's eye, with blade drawn and blue steel gleaming around her. Adrian's mouth curls up. Just the right news at the right time. About 5 days later, his uncle sends the welcome news he has been waiting for. 2 days after that, the day of departure arrives. About 5 days later, his uncle sends the welcome news he has been waiting for. 2 days after that, the day of departure arrives. Balorhard sighs down at him and asks if he really cannot stay still. He says he will explain, so Adrian should get back inside. Melon County, with its crest gleaming bold above the road, is the royal court's greatest production site for weaponry. Iron mines within its borders supply exceptionally high-quality iron, and a guild of veteran artisan smiths refines it into blades and gear. It is no exaggeration, Balorhard notes, to say that more than half of the weapons supplied to the royal family come from Ellen. Adrian grins wide. That is perfect. Von looking inside his head, our boy explains why. His cultivation has improved considerably, so it is about time he found a sword of his own. Originally he planned to just pick up a decent blade from the royal armory to use, but a small unpleasant memory surfaces. A palace armory keeper had once bowed to him and apologized that since it was by royal decree they could not issue any weapons to His Highness. Adrian had shrunk into a ball of frustration on the spot. Considering his track record, he had grumbled it was only natural, but it also meant that if he wanted a proper weapon, he had to get it outside the royal palace. Menu. Riding steady beside the carriage, Balorhard watches him quietly and thinks to himself that the boy is surprisingly thoughtful despite how he looks. Adrian squints against the glare, and the sunlight through the window is distracting. He asks quietly for someone to close it. Two escort knights on the road below catch the exchange and nearly fall off their horses. They ask each other when that prince ever asked for anything politely, and so the journey of 20 days begins. Menu. A hand-drawn map of the kingdom spreads across our boy's mind as the carriage rocks along the road. This journey involves a brief stop at Ellen County, which is a 3-day distance from the capital, then a visit to Iron Lion Castle, another 2 days away. That is where the party will rest before returning to the capital. And currently Adrian tells himself flatly he is stuck sitting in a carriage for 3 whole days without moving. Across from him, Adelia sits primly with her hands folded. In his head, Adrian sighs that the person sitting opposite him is no fun at all. He briefly considers finding something to do, and then decides against it, and closes his eyes. Since he has all this time, he thinks he should check his mana heart. He turns his attention inward, and grimaces immediately. As a side effect of using the Hymn of True Dragon slaying, the heart is completely empty, but it is about time he refilled it. Blue radiance ripples out around him as he settles into meditation with chin resting against his laced fingers. He does not need silence for this. He uses everything around him instead. The rattling vibration of the carriage, the slightly cold breeze passing by, the voices of the knights heard from outside. He gathers the specks of mana hidden in between, threading them gently in toward his chest. If he fills the empty mana heart, he tells himself calmly, then something should change. A slow blue vortex opens up in front of him. He blinks. His eyes fly open and then wider, because the space inside him is not what it used to be. He wonders when his mana heart got this big. Golden windows unfurl in the dark all around him. His earlier attempt led to an extraordinary feat beyond his capacity, and glimpsed a fragment of that colossal will. It is the effect of forcibly using the Hymn of True Dragon slaying. That attempt has been reflected in his body. His mana heart has expanded. Due to the expanded mana heart, his physical constitution has changed significantly. His body is now able to endure much more mana. Then the message our boy has been chasing lights up in golden text. He has reached the stage of sword expert. The connection to the origin has improved somewhat. Some of the restrictions on his recovered authorities have been lifted. Authority third eye has significantly improved. Adrian's mouth pulls into a slow, delighted grin. Adelia leans forward across the carriage, worried, and softly asks if His Highness is all right. He unfolds his hands and speaks it out loud to the empty road. He has gone another step further. By the time the carriages arrive at Ellen County, the sun sits high over a wide white mansion. A man in fine red robes steps forward first and bows deep. He tells the prince he cannot express how honored he is to meet him. He introduces himself as Edgar of the Ellen family. A younger man beside him, with the same red robes and hair combed back neat bows the same way. He introduces himself as Torrance, eldest son of the Ellen family. Adrian thanks them politely for the hospitality. Torrance tells him that since the journey was long, he must be exhausted, and offers to guide him to his room first. As they walk the corridors, Adrian's eyes track the swords and axes and glaives mounted along the walls. Inside, he judges them fast. They said this was a weapons production site, and sure enough, the entire mansion is filled with all sorts of weapons. However, they are just low-grade items that are merely flashy and useless in actual combat. Looking at this, it seems difficult to find the item he is looking for here. He turns to Torrance and asks if he did not say the Blacksmith's Guild was located within the territory. Torrance confirms that is correct, but hesitates. Adrian cuts him off. He would like to take a look around there. Torrance agrees to guide him. On the walk to the guild, he speaks carefully. Blacksmiths, he warns, are to a man rough in nature and stubborn people. When their work is in full swing, they often ignore even the lord of the land when he visits. The words they spit out are as cold and crude as the iron lumps they handle. So even if His Highness is offended by any of that, please consider it their craftsman's spirit and show generosity. They arrive at the guild. Torrance tells him that the heat from the furnace is intense, and if it is hard to endure, please speak up. Adrian barely hears him. The flames roar orange. The bellows hiss. The blacksmiths hammer the iron. The noise of hammering fills the whole air. There is one exceptionally clear sound. His head turns toward it before he even realizes he has moved. Torrance's voice fades behind him, calling out his title uncertain. Adrian breathes out softly. At the far end of the forge, a tall older man works alone at an anvil. white hair pulled back and thick shoulders and bare torso streaked with soot and glowing sweat. His hammer comes down in a slow, perfect rhythm. Every strike lands with that same clean, ringing tone that cut through the whole room from the doorway. Adrian stops. This is it. That is the one. An image rises out of the fire in front of his eyes. A sword lying on an ancient anvil with crossguard bright and a single blue jewel set at its heart. The first memory he remembers as a sword, the very first one. His pupils dilate, sweat runs down his temple, though he has not moved a muscle. A soft cloth touches his cheek. He blinks back into the present. Adelia is standing at his side with a small towel wiping his face gently. Her voice comes through the roar of the flames softly. She tells him he is sweating too much. He exhales. A round-faced man in a green apron hurries up with both hands pressed to his chest and bows deep. He offers his greetings to His Highness the Prince. He says his name is Zakin, and he is the person in charge of this blacksmith guild. The young man nods, distracted. Behind Zakin, the white-haired blacksmith at the far anvil has not stopped hammering. Not once. Not for the introduction, and not for the prince's presence, and not for anything. Zakin senses it and whips around. His face goes red. He splutters at the old man, and then loses his composure entirely. He shouts at him to stop his hands immediately and bow to His Highness the Prince. Adrian lifts a hand lazily. He tells the guildmaster he is loud. Zakin freezes. Adrian's tone stays light, but the words land firm. It is obvious they were dragged here against their will while working, he says. Doing something he did not even order. He glances at the cooling metal on the far anvil and adds it plain. The iron will cool. He turns back to the smiths still frozen in place and tells them that unless they plan to let the furnace fire die out too, they should keep standing there just like that. The younger blacksmiths jolt to life. One shouts to the other to grab the tools. Another calls out to step on the bellows. The white-haired man at the far anvil who never stopped brings his hammer down again. Our boy watches quietly. Sparks fly up around the old smith's shoulders in a bright shower, and the ringing note lands cleaner than anything else in the room. Adrian's left eye stays blue and calm. His third eye stirs behind it, freshly unlocked. For the first time since he opened it in this body, it has enough range to actually see what stands in front of him. Iron, fire, a hammer, and just that. The forge glows red behind them, and Torrance speaks softly as if telling a legend he barely believes himself. For whatever reason, he says that old man has been repeating the same process for the past 6 months, forging swords and then melting them back down. Adrian glances up at him and asks flatly if they were failures. Hard to say, Torrance admits. Because every sword he makes, Torrance continues, is said to be a masterpiece. That is why they call him the Master Smith of Swords. Even the swords he has made so far seemed completely flawless to Torrance's own eye. It is truly a mystery why he melted them all down, and on top of that, for the past month, the old man has barely slept and has been clinging only to his work. Torrance's voice drops. Since he is not a young man, their worry is not insignificant. Our boy walks on in silence, watching the shadow of the smith through the doorway. A true craftsman, he thinks quietly. Nothing more and nothing less. Several days pass. Adrian visits the forge early every morning and leaves late at night. During that time, the old man simply continues his daily work. Hammer rising and hammer falling and hammer rising again. The prince merely watches him in silence. Contrary to all the tension caused by the rumor that the notorious first prince was coming, it is almost surprising how there are no incidents at all. And finally, the day the prince is to depart arrives. Sparks fly across the anvil. Adrian sits and watches the hammer swing one more time. He says nothing. The white-haired man says nothing either. Later, walking down a shadowed corridor with Torrance beside him, our boy admits it quietly. He had hoped to see it completed before he left. Torrance stays silent. In his own head, Adrian regrets it more than he lets on. Torrance gently nudges him along and says they should go. He was told there is a farewell party tonight, and they must depart early tomorrow morning. He glances back one last time toward the forge, and in his private thought wonders if perhaps that was why the old man had been driving himself so hard. Perhaps the smith had hoped the prince would see the sword completed even for a moment. Footsteps sprint up behind them. Someone calls out for His Highness. Torrance turns hopeful. It seems he tells the prince that the master smith has completed the sword. Adrian's head snaps up. He is running before he has time to think about it. He arrives at the forge as the sun burns orange over the horizon. The old smith stands in silhouette, drawing a long finished blade slowly out of the last cloud of forge smoke. He turns to face the prince and bows low. He offers the sword out flat across his palms. He dedicates this sword, he says, to his highness. Adrian catches it and lifts. The steel catches the sunset and throws the light back doubled. The smith recites the words as if from memory. Heat it to match the sun rising on the horizon, and cool it until its hue matches the king's crimson robes. If you do so, a sword born of the sun, and a king shall emerge. From the Song of the Smiths, our boy studies the blade against the sky, and asks, softer now, if it has a name. The old man considers. How about, he says, calling it Twilight? Adrian glances down at him. He asks if that is the twilight of dawn or the twilight of dusk. The smith gives a small, tired smile. For him, he says, it is dusk, but for his highness it must be dawn. Adrian huffs a small laugh. He tells the old man that he is surprisingly eloquent for a blacksmith. The smith bows his head. That is, he says quietly, a relief, and then his knees fold. Adrian catches him before he hits the ground with the newly named Twilight still raised in one hand. The old man's breath is thin but even. Adrian's face goes still. He looks over his shoulder at Torrance and speaks with a tone none of them have heard from him before. He tells Torrance to tell his uncle. He is going to spend tonight here. The stars come out over the manor. 2 knights stand watch by torches at the doorway of a small side room. Inside, under a soft lamp, the old blacksmith lies propped against pillows. His voice comes out rough and slow. He speaks about the moment his highness stood behind him that day, how the sword took shape as if by destiny, and how it felt as though the sword itself had decided the day it would be born. He looks up at the young prince at his bedside. He asks if that is what the prince thinks. Adrian is silent for a beat. In truth, he says. He leans down close and speaks something very softly against the old man's ear. The smith's eyes fly wide. His breath catches. He whispers, asking if then his highness is. His voice trails off, unable to finish it. Yes, Adrian answers simply. So how could he not understand this fellow's heart? The old man stares at him for a long moment, and then a slow shaking laugh works its way up out of his chest. He sinks back into the pillows and exhales. He sees now. Now he understands. His hand lifts weakly. He asks if his highness would hand him that sword for just a moment. Adrian passes Twilight into the old craftsman's grip. The smith wraps both hands around the hilt and lowers his forehead to the pommel. His voice comes out hoarse and reverent. Please, he prays, may this sword. Adrian quiet finishes it for him. Become as great as you are. The smith closes his eyes. It certainly will, our boy tells him gently. The old man lets out one long, satisfied breath. Certainly, he murmurs, and he does not open his eyes again. Outside, the torches burn in the wind. Adrian sits alone in the dim room, with Twilight resting across his knees, looking not at the sword, but at the small, still figure in the bed. Certainly, he repeats to himself low and steady. Certainly. By morning, Twilight lies, wrapped in red velvet, inside a lacquered display box in the courtyard. Torrance stands beside it, sweating a little. He tells the prince carefully that while one cannot simply discuss the value of a sword made with a craftsman's soul, he believes it would be inconvenient for his highness to actually use such a piece. It just so happens, he adds, that he has this magic sword to dedicate to his highness. It is a fine middle-grade blade in its own right, so please accept this one instead. Adrian lifts the offered magic sword and turns it once in his hand. He tells Torrance it is good. Even if it is not high grade, it is a solid middle-grade sword. Torrance beams. Adrian tucks Twilight securely under his arm anyway, and adds that, so then that sword, just a piece made by a renowned master smith, pouring his very soul into it as a tremendous gift. And yet to think Torrance would still try to offer a magic sword on top of that. Torrance's beam locks in place. Indeed, he stammers, and indeed the loyalty of the Ellen family toward the royal family is exceptional. It is an honor for the family. Inside his own head, he is screaming. He tried to use the flashy magic sword as bait to get the master smith's sword back, and now he has just ended up handing over a perfectly good sword for nothing. The road unwinds through green mountain country. The carriages and infantry will follow slowly behind. The cavalry will ride ahead at maximum speed. A knight commander shouts down the line that they are behind schedule, so they must hurry. Keep up. His men roar back a chorus of acknowledgement. The guy pauses at the roadside and watches his uncle ride up dusty and businesslike. He greets him casually and says he looks busy. Balorhard slows his horse. Come to think of it, he tells the prince he did not see a hide nor hair of Adrian the entire time they were in the county. His Majesty, he admits, had given him a separate assignment. Adrian's mouth quirks. He supposes his excursion was not free after all. Right, Balorhard says, so Adrian should get ready too. They plan to ride fast to reach Iron Lion Castle by tonight, which means Adrian will have to ride a horse. Adrian pauses. About that, he says. He clears his throat and states it out loud with as much dignity as he can muster. He does not know how to ride a horse. Balorhard stares at him. Silence for a very long moment. Out in the sunlit field, our boy is unceremoniously hoisted up onto a saddle by two escort knights while he clings on for dear life. In the back of his head, he complains to himself, half indignant and half bewildered. He was a sword. How could he ever have ridden a horse? Then, the road to the Iron Lion Castle unfolds in a small comedy of errors. There are a few twists and turns along the way. Our boy is hoisted onto a horse by escort knights and clings on through afternoon and evening. Even if it is not the half day they had originally planned, they manage to reach their destination in about a full day. Adrian tips his head back and takes in the stone walls looming over him. His hair sticks out in every direction, and his expression is completely flat. So this is the Iron Lion Castle, he mutters. Inside the courtyard, a wall of cloaked knights snaps to formation. A red-haired knight at the front bows deep and announces himself as York of the Wallenden family, greeting His Royal Highness the First Prince. Behind him, the assembled Iron Lions bow as one and greet the noble blood of Leonberg. Adrian's eyes narrow slightly as he glances around the group. In his head, he notes it dryly. Their spirit is overflowing more than necessary. As for the reason, well, it is obvious. Wistina. A tall figure moves out through the ranks, clear violet eyes and long dark hair falling loose around silver plate armor. Arwen. She stops at Adrian's side and murmurs without looking at him, asking if she show. Adrian says her name softly. She dips into a low bow and speaks so only he can hear. She has counted the days, she tells him, waiting solely to see His Highness again. Behind them, the red-armored knights of the Iron Lions almost bristle in unison. Adrian catches it and thinks it out dry. The reaction is quite immediate. Then a cold pressure rises from a completely different direction. Our boy realizes, half amused and half concerned. Hostility directed at him as her master could provoke Adelia. He turns his head. Adelia, in her rose-pink dress, is staring at Arwen with a look that could freeze the fountain. Adrian says her name plainly. Adelia. She snaps out of it and blinks up at him with a small, startled look. She answers immediately. She lowers her eyes and steps back. Inside, Adrian permits himself a small private note. It is a good thing he developed her slave mentality early on. Now then, he says brightly, Arwen should follow him. They have much to catch up on, and it would be even better if those guys behind Arwen came along too. The training ground opens up wide under a clear sky. Adrian stands at the center with a wooden sword resting on one shoulder and a plain cotton shirt rolled at the sleeves. He looks around at the ranks of white and red Iron Lion apprentices with mild curiosity. He tells them he wishes to witness the swordsmanship of the Iron Lions, said to be the best in the kingdom. So who will show him the sword of the Iron Lions? On. Silence. He waits. Silence stretches. In the back, a few boots shift, but no one steps forward. He smiles thin. If his position burdens them, he says, then he stakes the Leonberg name that he will not hold anyone responsible for the outcome of the spar. Is there still no one? More silence. For the renowned Iron Lions, he remarks to be so faint-hearted. It seems the title Kingdom's Best is simply a bluff. That does it. A young red-haired knight breaks the line and steps out. He introduces himself carefully as Dale of the Dennant family. Though he is far too lacking to represent the sword of the Iron Lions, if His Highness would permit him, he will dare to stand before him. Adrian rolls his shoulder loose. There is no need for permission. He asked for it first. Dale sets his stance and cries out that His Highness should please be careful. Adrian's blue eye gleams once. A single flash of azure light cracks across the training ground, and Dale is airborne before he can complete his swing. He hits the dirt hard, groaning with his wooden sword spinning out of his grip. The young man rests the training blade on his shoulder again and calls out flat. Next. Everyone else stands there in silence. A stouter, red-haired knight stalks out from the ranks with his teeth already grit. He introduces himself as Paul Rotham and snaps that Dale is only in his first year, but he is in his third. Adrian meets him mid-lunge and lays him out with the same clean blue arc. Paul manages one sound before he goes down beside Dale. Two more step out together. A silver-haired knight introduces himself as Hallie, a ninth-year apprentice, and a companion named Judith tries to answer with the same rank before coughing on her own breath. They promise that the sword of the Iron Lion never loses as they close the distance. Adrian answers by cutting the promise in half with them. Their wooden blades snap in the dirt. Silence returns to the courtyard. Adrian sighs and drags a hand down his face. He turns to the ring of gray metal knights standing at the back with Arwen, and speaks over their heads. He would like to face those official knights now. That lot are quite slow to move. Then he turns to Arwen at his side. Her name in his mouth is quiet. She answers immediately. When he returns to the capital, he tells her she will be coming with him. She is silent a long moment. Then she bows her head, as His Highness wills. Behind her, a tall older knight with long silver hair and a plain white surcoat finally steps forward with his sword already loose in his hand. He calls out for His Highness. Adrian's mouth twitches. Too easy, he mutters under his breath. The older man reaches him and speaks courteously. He has heard he says that His Highness enjoys wagers. How about a small bet to liven things up? The guy tilts his head curious. The knight lays it out plainly. If he defeats His Highness then. Denied. Adrian cuts him off. His voice does not rise, but it lands firm. Arwen is not a tournament prize. Beside him, Arwen inhales quietly. She murmurs his title. The knight recovers gracefully. He suggests betting something else instead. Adrian turns his head. He calls for Carl to bring the sword. Carl steps up bearing a lacquered box wrapped in cloth. Adrian lifts out the offered magic sword from Ellen County. It is the rune-etched middle-grade blade Torrance had tried to sub in. He holds it out level for the older knight to see. If he wins, our boy tells him he will give him this sword right here. The knight's eyes widen sharply. He steps back and bows deep instead. He protests that His Highness is 100,000 times more precious than any sword, for the value of a swordmaster cannot be compared to a mere sword. Adrian says nothing. She simply watches. Very well, the older knight answers softly at last. He straightens and speaks it out formally. Dunham of the Fahrenheit family. He is an official knight of the Iron Lion Knights and on the verge of achieving triple chain. Adrian notes internally that, so then Dunham is still a double chain. Dunham chokes but does not correct him. Then Dunham lifts a long, slender sword between them and says something that stops Adrian mid-thought. This sword, he says, is the 17th sword made by the artisan called the Master Smith of Swords. If Adrian wins, this sword shall belong to His Highness. Adrian goes very still. What a coincidence, he says softly. He turns and beckons. Carl brings up another cloth-wrapped bundle. From it, Adrian draws his own blade with long steel gleaming even through the training ground dust. He lifts it into the light. He tells Dunham calmly that he also happens to have a sword received from that Master Smith. Dunham's face changes. He says it is the Master Smith's 100th work, and then slower he adds that he has never heard rumors of the Master Smith making a 100th sword. Adrian's expression stays unreadable. He expects, not he answers. It is the Master Smith's final work completed just a few days ago. Dunham takes that in silently. Well, fine, he says at last. Blue chain mana lifts around his shoulders in a slow rising wave. Although His Highness walks a misguided path of the sword, he says he can recognize the ceaseless effort imbued in that path. To show a small token of respect, for that he will do his utmost in this spar. In misguided path, Adrian repeats to himself in the quiet of his own head. How insignificant. His voice does not carry aloud, but his thought lands cold. This position was never one to call his own from the start. Respect directed at him does not matter. It is enough, he tells himself, if it comes from his own people. He turns his head slightly and speaks over his shoulder. Adelia. Watch closely. Adelia straightens. She answers yes and then pauses. Because blue mana pours out of Adrian in a slow rising column, radiant and clean, and his hair lifts on the pressure of it. This path, he tells her without turning around, is the path she must walk from now on. Golden fire ignites around Adelia in response. Her hymn rises up out of her without prompting. A warm, rich glow of oath and devotion answering his sword. She lowers her hands to her chest and bows deep to his back. She whispers into the light. She will surely, she tells him, do so, Your Highness. Steam curls up from a porcelain cup. Across a wide table, Vale Balarhard sits with one hand cradling his own cup and asks lightly how many times they have visited the Iron Lion Castle now. The man opposite him is Lord Wallenden, head of the Wallenden family and master of these walls. He sets down his own tea and answers dryly. This is the 4th time. Balarhard hums low in his throat. His eyes drift as he counts it out. The 4th prince has no interest in the throne, so he likely will not come. The 3rd and 5th princes visited while the 1st prince was still on probation. Even the 2nd prince stopped by a short while ago. No matter how poor his reputation might have been, he adds quietly, it is undeniable that the 1st prince was the legitimate heir of the kingdom. Wallenden's jaw sets. He says sharply that, for things to have reached this point, Balarhard surely bears a large share of the blame. If Vale, the commander of the 3rd Legion, had supported the 1st prince even a little, His Highness would not have become so isolated. So why is he acting like the boy's guardian only now after all this time? Balarhard sets his cup down. His voice is even. Wallenden is not wrong. He certainly cast his nephew aside once. His eyes drop to the surface of the tea. When he returned, he says a man who would have been not just an incompetent ruler but a tyrant was what his nephew had become. One day, when he scolded the boy for being intoxicated by some wicked potion, the young prince had shrieked at him, asking if he was out of his mind right now. His face shows all the anger. Then the boy charged at his own uncle with a drawn sword, a hopeless scoundrel. Balarhard's gaze goes cold as the memory carries him further. When he returned to the north in such disappointment, his nephew sent him poisoned wine, shamelessly calling it a gift and enclosing a letter with it. As Balarhard burned that cheap poison to nothing with his own mana chains, he tells Wallenden plainly he burned what little familial affection remained along with it. However, that scoundrel who he was certain would never change has become different. He endures grueling training. He is growing stronger by the day. Wallenden lifts an eyebrow unmoved. He demands to know if Balarhard did not say so himself, that the 1st prince must never become king. Balarhard closes his eyes for a beat. Then he does something Wallenden has plainly never seen before. He stands and walks around the corner of the table and bows. The boy he is now, Balarhard says quietly, is a completely different person from the past. Give him a chance at least so that he may stand at the same starting line as the other princes. He does not lift his head. He begs of him. Wallenden's cup halts halfway to his lips. He simply does not understand, he mutters. He has not a clue whether it is Balarhard or the 1st prince who has changed. He waves a hand tiredly. First raise your head. A man known as a Silver Lion should not be doing this. The door slams open. A servant rushes in breathless with hand pressed to his chest. He stammers that the 1st prince is doing something. Outside, the sun blazes over the courtyard as our boy stands in cotton shirt and rolled sleeves with a training sword in hand and his hair damp with sweat. Carl walks nervously beside Torrance at the edge of the field. Torrance tells him with a fixed smile that there is no need to worry too much. Dunham knows his limits, so nothing serious will happen. Even in a live blade duel, surely he would not beat royalty senselessly. Balarhard reaches the courtyard steps with Wallenden right behind him. He does not slow and does not raise his voice. He says it is not the Prince Wallenden should be worrying about right now. It is his knight. Wallenden barks a strained laugh. He says Vale has truly become strange. He looks pale, and now he is speaking nonsense. At the far end of the field, Dunham of the Fahrenheit family goes down on his face, wooden sword clattering out of his grip, silver hair spilling into the dirt. Wallenden freezes mid-step. He stammers Dunham's name. Voices rise all around the courtyard. Even Dunham has been knocked out. His Highness has won again. Adrian walks past the fallen knight without a backward glance, with his sword loose in his hand. Wallenden manages to ask what all this is. Balarhard does not answer at first. He just tilts his head toward the field, with his mouth pulled thin. He tells him he was not the one to worry about. Adrian lifts the wooden blade. Blue radiance ripples around his shoulders. He calls out over the courtyard. Next, Wallenden barks Bleo inept. Inside his own head, our boy hears an old lesson his uncle used to repeat. A knight truly began at 2 rings. Those words, he thinks now, were no exaggeration. He steps into the next opponent's guard. The current hymn of sparring, he tells himself grimly mid-exchange, is insufficient for this. But he cannot bring out the hymn of true dragon slaying against a regular knight, because that path leads straight back to the collapse of the last time. In that case, a golden window lights up in the corner of his vision as he draws breath. Trait hyperfocus is activated. All the noise of the courtyard drops away. Sword strokes come to him in slow ripples. His body does not feel like his own. It feels sharpened and precise beyond his usual range. It is that same sensation from back then, he realizes. The way he stood behind the master smith and let the ringing of the hammer align every piece of him. He steps through the next attack instead of blocking it, and catches the opponent's blade offline and finishes it with one blue arc. Next, another knight steps up. Silver hair and red hair, and women in Iron Lion colors, and apprentices and officers together. He takes them one after another. Sword and blue trail and silence. Sweat runs down his temple. His breath begins to burn in his chest. By the time the 8th knight hits the dirt, our boy is glowing. Someone shouts that Petten has been knocked out. That is already 8 consecutive wins for His Highness. But Adrian is not really hearing them. Inside his chest, he speaks the words to himself again, the ones he wove into his very first hymn, enduring 1,000 waves throughout 100 bouts. He shall stand tall even before a wave greater than those. A golden window unfurls quietly in front of him. A new verse is added to the hymn of sparring. Only now do I rise holding the sword, he tells it. The blue vortex swirls up around him harder than before. He speaks the line a second time into the light, steady and low. Only now do I rise holding the sword. More windows follow. The grade of the hymn of sparring has become extraordinary. The hymn of sparring changes to match its grade. Golden text ripples through his vision. Ha! The hymn of sparring has become the hymn of dueling. The young man's breath catches. He lifts the wooden sword to the sun and lets his shoulders drop just a little. He whispers that he succeeded. Then he passes out in front of the knights. A younger knight, still bruised from his own defeat moments before, crouches down in front of him with a small, worried smile. He asks softly if Adrian is all right. Then a heavy gauntlet lands on Adrian's shoulder from behind. A blue-armored knight bows and speaks it up out of his chest for the whole courtyard to hear. They pay respect, he says, to the victory achieved by His Highness. The rest of them answer as one. Respect to the sword of the first prince. Respect to his fighting spirit. They pay respect to his victory. Our boy is abruptly lifted onto the shoulders of 2 grinning iron lions and hoisted around the field. He clings on with wide eyes, entirely unequipped for this turn of events. He stammers out, asking what this is. Just a moment ago they were eager to tear him apart. Balorhard walks up alongside him with hands loose behind his back and mouth relaxed for the first time in the entire hour. He tells Adrian they are simple men by nature. The sword and victory. Nothing excites them more than that. He glances up at his nephew with something almost fond. Looking at Adrian's face, Balorhard adds, he must have thought he would incur their resentment. A fair defeat, the Count says quietly, is more valuable than a foul victory. When both sides have fought their hardest, does mere victory or defeat matter? Then his tone drops a shade drier. Dunham, he adds, might be a little resentful though, since he now has to offer up that mastersmith's sword he bragged about so much to His Highness. Nearby, a red-haired knight, who has already recovered enough to laugh, grins over at Dunham as the older man hauls himself back up onto his feet. He calls out to Dunham that it is quite refreshing. Dunham was so arrogant about that sword. Inside his own head, Adrian looks up at the orange sky over the castle walls and takes it in quietly. He thought everything he knew of knights had been forgotten and abandoned, along with the mana heart. But it seems there was at least one thing that had not changed. Being gracious in defeat and revering the strong. The spirit of the knights. In the sunlit courtyard of the Iron Lion Castle, our boy pauses at the base of the departure steps to make his farewells. He tells Lord Wallenden warmly that they should meet again next time. He prays for the Count's health until then. Wallenden inclines his head and asks His Highness to take care of himself as well. Adrian glances back offhand. He tells Count Wallenden to please keep what happened during his stay a secret. Wallenden lifts an eyebrow and says, surely it would be helpful to His Highness to make it known. Adrian's mouth curls slightly. There is someone he says he wishes to mess with a little. The camp goes up under a sunset sky further down the road. Balorhard tells him they will camp here tonight and that he himself will go scout the surroundings for a moment. Adrian waves him on. At the edge of the fire, Arwen stands stiff and silent, staring somewhere between the trees and her own boots. The picture of a woman who has been handed an order she does not yet know what to do with. Adrian watches her a beat and dismisses it internally. Arwen will adapt soon enough. He yawns and stretches. He should go inside and rest too, he mumbles. Then he pauses. Inside the tent, Adelia is already up in her pink dress and white apron with a tray of tea and a bright, welcoming smile. She tells him he has returned. Our boy sighs internally. The one he took in is supposed to be a sword genius with S-rank aptitude. Yet she is still doing the things a maid would do. Adelia flinches at his expression. She stammers and asks if there is perhaps something he is displeased with. Adrian waves a hand at her from the couch. He tells her no, forget it, she may leave. Adelia bows deep and slips out. Lone Adrian folds his hands behind his head and stares up at the tent canvas. The Iron Lion Knights he thinks were different from what he thought they would be. When he used the authority of judgment on them, a rippling wall of small windows had lit up in front of every knight. Swordsmanship grade B and C and D. The majority of regular knights did not possess swordsmanship talent, surpassing B grade. In the past, he thinks these are people who would have barely reached intermediate sword expert level, even after a lifetime of grueling training. Ordinary people who would have fallen away in vain. Yet such people have already reached what would once have been called a superhuman level. The caliber possessed by a superhuman, he realizes, has declined beyond comparison. But the caliber of ordinary people has risen dramatically. He sits up with elbows on knees and speaks the answer aloud to no one. That is precisely because of Mana Chain. His uncle, he continues, is a figure who could have aimed for transcendence in the past. That is why he was so displeased that Balorhard threw away that possibility. However, this era, he lifts his hand, and in his memory, the whole world curls into a small, shining sphere. This is an era where there is not even a chance to build achievements beyond extraordinary grades. His fist tightens. In the end, everything is due to the flow of time. The tent flap sweeps aside as Balorhard returns from the perimeter. Adrian does not turn his head. He simply says it out loud. He must admit it. He does not know this era well. So he will start learning again from the beginning. Balorhard's boots stop just inside the doorway. He tells his nephew that is a good mindset. It is not too late yet, the Count adds evenly. If Adrian puts in the effort from now on, he can achieve his dream. Adrian blinks. No, what dream? Balorhard is already smiling. A small, satisfied, deeply proud smile. He asks if Adrian has not already won the hearts of the Iron Lions. If it had been any of the other princes, they would not have been able to mingle with them so casually. It was a very wise judgment, Ian. The young man's face goes through 3 colors at once. He stammers, asking what is wrong with that man. He asks if his uncle has gone mad. Does his uncle not remember the conditions of the bet he made with him? Balorhard tilts his head. If it is the bet about defeating the third prince that is still ongoing. No, Adrian cuts him off. Their bet was to defeat a double-chain knight. His face slowly falls as he does the math in real time. Then he practically won the bet already. Balorhard's boots turn deliberately. He walks around Adrian's couch and steps into the center of the tent. His voice drops into a formal register. He shall do, he says as promised back then. Adrian blinks up at him. He asks what? Von Balorhard the Count intones as a Count of the Kingdom and Commander of the 3rd Legion shall officially support the first Prince of the Kingdom, Adrian Leonberg. Our boy sits perfectly still. Inside his head, one small question tumbles slowly across the void. What is he talking about? Then it hits. He is scrambling off the couch before he even finishes the sentence. He shouts up at Balorhard's face, telling him to just trust him. When did he say he wanted to be king? Balorhard's declaration becomes a bombshell. By the time they return to the palace, the courtyard is a wall of noise. People congratulate him and say they sincerely congratulate him. It is truly a joy for the kingdom. Newly assigned royal knights in gleaming Leonberg red and gold create a commotion in ranks along the corridor. A fresh wave of attendants and servants sent from the palace bustles about setting up rooms and restocking his wardrobe and generally shining every surface within reach. The guy abruptly finds himself standing at the exact center of all of it. His hair sticks up in stress and he swings his sleeves wildly. He yells that it is so chaotic and to send them all back right now. A stiffly armored knight bows and reports that they have come by royal decree. Even if His Highness orders them to leave, they will not listen. Adrian grits his teeth. He snaps that they should at least clear out of his sight. It is annoying him to death. The last of them file out with bows. Adrian collapses onto a couch and lets out a long, ragged sigh at the ceiling. Finally, some quiet. The door slams open. A voice calls out asking if brother is there. Adrian's head lolls sideways with an already exhausted look. He asks why Gilliam is here now. Third Prince Gilliam Leonberg strides into the room in a crimson jacket with gold trim gleaming. His reddish auburn hair is swept back and his grin is sharp. He purrs that His Highness played the fool quite well, secretly learning swordsmanship from Count Balerhard, and even revealing such grand ambitions. Adrian says it without any particular emotion. He asks who learned what from whom. Gilliam keeps going. He says he truly intended to save his elder brother's face at least, so how could he do this? Adrian answers dryly that he is grateful to the point of tears. Gilliam leans in close with his voice dropping to a hiss. He tells his brother that he has made a very big mistake, because he is going to make Adrian dearly pay for having deceived him. Adrian stares at the ceiling. This guy, that guy. He tells the ceiling he said he had no interest in the throne. His fist tightens against the couch cushion. He thinks grimly, to go find the culprit who caused all this. Later, when Gilliam has finally departed and the palace is finally quieted, Adrian steps up beside his uncle in the corridor. He tells his uncle, with as much polite restraint as he can muster, that he will play along for a while, so please back out at an appropriate time, because he has no interest in things like the throne. Balerhard glances at him sideways. He asks why Adrian went and started things without consulting him. Adrian sighs. He asks if his uncle is worried about Balerhard. Balerhard's tone shifts and the harsh count fades into something quieter. Balerhard, he says slowly, is the shield that protects the kingdom from the monsters of the northern mountains. As long as the royal family and nobles do not push the harshness of winter onto them, nothing bad will happen to the Balerhard family. Adrian exhales. If that is so, then it is a relief. It was only a matter of timing. It was bound to happen anyway. But Balerhard turns his back to him with hands folded behind his cloak. He asks quietly if Adrian truly does not know the fate of a firstborn who fails to succeed the throne. Adrian goes still. The situation does not change, Balerhard says, just because Adrian keeps crouching down. If he needs time to accept it, Balerhard will give him as much as he needs. However, he should keep this in mind. The legitimacy of the firstborn does not disappear unless he dies. The Count walks away without waiting for a reply. Adrian sinks slowly onto the edge of his bed and stares at the floor. In his head, he answers the empty room. He is telling himself that no matter how much time is given, he will not change. What he really needs to find, he thinks fiercely, is his own authority and power that reached transcendence. So there is no way he would want something as trivial as the right of succession to the throne. He definitely thought that way. Golden light spills across a vast palace floor. A herald's voice rings out crisp and formal against the vaulted ceiling. The legitimate bloodline of the Leonberg kingdom, the eldest son of the Leonberg royal family. His Highness the First Prince Adrian Leonberg is entering. Adrian walks down the long red carpet in a fitted royal jacket of black and blood red, with a gold-trimmed cape hanging heavy from his shoulder and chin lifted. Nobles bow in waves on either side as he passes. Somewhere in the shadows behind a pillar, a figure in a deep hood watches him quietly, with a single pale blue eye reflecting the candlelight. Our boy walks up to the head of the banquet floor and rests one hand lightly against a marble balustrade. His mouth stays flat and his gaze cool. He definitely thought that way, until the banquet began.